May 15, 1930, 2-year-old Mary Agnes Maroney disappeared suddenly from the busy city of Chicago. This mysterious event captured global attention for almost a century. For 93 long years, despite false trails and numerous DNA tests, the little girl's whereabouts remained a mystery. But finally, after more than 9 decades in 2023, the scattered puzzle pieces started to fit together. What could have happened to Mary Agnes all those years? How did the long-awaited breakthrough finally occur after all these years? Today's case takes us to Chicago, often referred to as the Windy City. It is the largest city in the state of Illinois, USA. Situated on the southwestern shore of Lake Michigan, Chicago is renowned for its impressive skyline, iconic architecture, and vibrant culture. The Magnificent Mile hosts upscale shopping, while neighborhoods like Wicker Park and Pilsen brim with artistic expression. Let's start from the very beginning, when Catherine Maroney was just 13 years old when she fell in love with a 21-year-old man named Michael Maroney. Michael had journeyed all the way from Ireland, dreaming of a better life in America. Despite their age difference, Catherine and Michael's hearts were intertwined, and they decided to tie the knot in 1923. They settled into a cozy little life, living on the second floor above a bustling grocery store at 5200 Wentworth Avenue in Chicago, Illinois. Michael was known for his hard work and determination to build a better life for his family. When Catherine turned 17 on May 9, 1928, she became a mother of a beautiful baby girl with captivating light blue eyes, whom she named Mary Agnes Maroney. The following year in 1929, another bundle of joy arrived, and they named her Anastasia Maroney. Just a year later in 1930, Catherine found herself expecting yet again, eagerly awaiting for her third child to join the family. The Maroney family with Irish roots faced tough financial times during that period, making life quite challenging for them. It was during the Great Economic Depression, which began in the United States and affected the whole world. Many families and businesses faced financial difficulties, and the Maroney family was no different. Michael, the father, lost his job and earned only $15 a week by distributing handbills, which wasn't enough to take care of his family of 4. In a desperate attempt to find a better job and get some help, Michael placed an advertisement in the Chicago Daily Tribune. He hoped that someone would offer him a job or assistance to support his family during those tough times. During that period, newspapers had special sections where people and families could reach out for assistance from generous individuals, philanthropist groups, or organizations. The Maroney families placed the plea for help in the newspaper, hoping for a response. Unfortunately, 3 long weeks passed, and they hadn't received any help yet. But then, on Wednesday, May 13, 1930, just after little Mary Agnes's 2nd birthday, a kind man named Edgar Gilpin, who worked as a male nurse and philanthropist, noticed their advertisement and responded to it. He was willing to offer his assistance to the struggling Maroney family. He offered Michael some help by giving him a suit and a pair of shoes to assist him in finding a better job. The Maroney family was overjoyed and grateful for this small but meaningful support. They accepted the offer through the agency, which meant their address was shared publicly with other families in need. Unfortunately, the Maroney family's address got into the hands of a mysterious woman, leading to some unforeseen consequences. On May 14, 1930, Catherine was at home with her daughters, Mary Agnes and Anastasia, getting ready to clean the house. While scrubbing the floor, suddenly she heard a knock at the door, and she opened it. She was surprised to see a young and elegantly dressed woman with beautiful blonde hair standing there. The woman wore a fancy gray suit with blue trimmings, and her hat was adorned with gray lace. Catherine couldn't help but notice the stunning pearly necklace and jewels that watch the woman had on. It was the first time Catherine saw this woman. The woman told her that she was sent by a social worker named Mrs. Henderson to help the family with their situation. Catherine had never heard of Mrs. Henderson before, but she thought that maybe they were responding to the advertisement they had placed in the newspaper for help. Catherine genuinely believed that the woman was there to offer assistance, so she warmly welcomed her inside to have a conversation. The woman brought a lot of groceries, including fresh vegetables for the Maroney family that she had bought from the grocery store down the street from Maroney's house. She admired Catherine's cleaning skills and complimented her for being ambitious. Catherine invited her to sit, and they had a long conversation. Catherine shared all about the family struggles with the woman, who listened to her carefully and seemed friendly and eager to help. Catherine felt a sense of relief and comfort knowing that finally, someone was there to lend a hand to her family. The woman was kind and spoke in a gentle and sweet manner. She seemed smart and well-educated. While they were talking, the woman noticed little Mary Agnes playing on the floor, and her face immediately brightened with joy. It was clear that she found Mary Agnes to be an adorable and charming child. Even though both of Catherine's daughters, Mary Agnes and Anastasia, were at home, the woman's attention was focused solely on Mary Agnes. As they talked, the woman shared that she had sadly lost her own daughter last year. Catherine's heart went out to her. But then the conversation took a strange turn. The woman made an unusual request. She asked if she could take little Mary Agnes with her to California for a short time. She reassured Catherine, saying that Mary Agnes would come back looking quite different, as chubby as a little butterball. Catherine felt unsure because the woman was someone she didn't know at all, and California was quite a distant place. So Catherine decided not to let her little daughter go with this stranger. But then the woman gave Catherine a $2 note and promised to come back the next day. Even though Catherine was still confused, she found the woman's behavior and presence compelling. So she eventually agreed to let Mary Agnes go with her. Before the woman left, Catherine asked for her name, and after a short pause, the woman answered, "My name is Julia Otis." When Michael came back home from work, Catherine excitedly shared with him about the visit from Julia Otis. However, Michael quickly realized that Mary Agnes wasn't at home. He asked Catherine where their little daughter was, and Catherine told him that she allowed Mary Agnes to go with Julia Otis to California. Michael became worried for their daughter, but they decided to wait and hope for Mary Agnes's return the next day. That night, the Maroney family had a good meal, something they hadn't enjoyed in a while. The next day, on May 15, 1930, Julia Otis returned with Mary Agnes, and as soon as Mary Agnes saw her mother, she rushed into her arms and hugged her tightly. Julia brought not only more groceries for the Maroney family, but also some exciting news. She revealed that she had managed to secure a better job for Michael. Adding to the joy, she carried a bag full of clothes for the upcoming baby. Catherine was elated. It felt like they were finally receiving the help they needed. Julia's kindness made Catherine trust her more, who seemed to genuinely care for their family's well-being. At that moment, Julia made another request. She asked Catherine if she could take Mary Agnes shopping nearby, as the little girl's clothes were looking worn and her shoes were in bad shape. Catherine, feeling grateful for all of Julia's assistance, agreed to the idea, thinking it was a thoughtful gesture. However, Mary Agnes seemed to resist going with Julia. She started crying and clung to her mother, not wanting to leave her side. Despite this, Catherine handed her daughter over to Julia, trusting that everything would be fine. They left for the shop, which was just a short distance away. Catherine believed they would be back soon. Unfortunately, after they left, neither Julia nor Mary Agnes were ever seen again. As the hours went by, Catherine became increasingly concerned about why they were taking so long. At first, she thought that maybe Julia had taken Mary Agnes out for lunch, but it shouldn't have taken such a long time. As more time passed, Catherine began to feel that something wasn't right. She started regretting her decision to let her 2-year-old daughter go with Julia. Later, when Michael returned home from work, Catherine explained the entire situation to him. They searched everywhere for Mary Agnes and Julia, but there was no trace of them. Feeling helpless, they made the decision to contact the Chicago Police Department and inform them that their daughter was missing. The police wanted a detailed description of Julia, but Catherine could only provide a few details. She mentioned that the woman appeared to be in her 20s, around 5 feet 2 inches tall, and weighed about 125 pounds. The most distinctive feature that Catherine remembered was that the woman had prominent teeth. The next day, on May 16, 1930, around 8:30 p.m., the Maroney family received a letter. This letter was written on a special paper and had a mark on it that showed it was sent out at 4:30 p.m. It was sent using a special delivery service, and inside the envelope, there was a $5 bill. The letter read, "Please, don't be alarmed. I've taken your little girl to California with me. I have hired a special nurse to care for her. We'll be back in 2 months. By that time, you will be on your feet again and will be able to care for her. She didn't even cry a bit. She is outfitted like a princess. In the meantime, I'll help all I can to get you on your feet. And don't worry about anything else. When you get this letter, we'll be on our way to California." Catherine hurriedly told the police about the letter, desperately wishing they could locate Mary Agnes. The police scoured every corner of Chicago's railway stations, hoping for a sign of Mary Agnes getting on a train with the woman Catherine had described, but it felt like they had disappeared like a puff of smoke. The police got wind of a young girl with blonde hair, possibly Mary Agnes, had been seen on a train bound for Kansas, accompanied by a woman and a nurse. Yet when the train pulled into Kansas, it seemed like all three had become invisible. The police weren't able to find any of them. As more people heard about the letter, witnesses came forward with their stories about a woman who seemed to match Julia Otis's description. A staff member at Goldblatt's department store, located around 8 miles from the Maroney's home on Ashland and Chicago Avenue, came forward. She mentioned that a woman like Julia had bought a bunch of baby clothes using a new $50 bill from the store. Interestingly, these were the very same clothes Julia had given Catherine for her upcoming baby. Another woman stepped forward and informed the police that on May 15, 1930, she witnessed an unusual incident in a store in downtown Chicago. She noticed a lady with a young girl, and it seemed like the lady was anxious while dictating a letter to an older woman. This was striking, as writing the letter was a task she could have done on her own. The police weren't able to determine the identity of the older woman. It's unclear whether Julia used the older woman to write the letter, possibly to disguise her handwriting, or if the older woman had some connection to Julia. On May 19, 1930, the Maroney family received another letter, this time from a woman named Mrs. Alice Henderson. She claimed to be the cousin of Julia Otis. In the letter, Alice explained that Julia had experienced a lot of loss recently. Her husband and child had both passed away in the previous year. Alice mentioned that Julia was feeling very lonely and was struggling emotionally, even on the verge of a breakdown. Her doctor recommended a trip to California to help her mental state. Julia had decided to take Mary Agnes with her because she saw her lost child in her. Alice thought this would provide Catherine some relief from childcare, allowing her to focus on the new baby. She assured that she would bring Mary Agnes back safe and sound once Julia felt better. Alice also mentioned that she would continue to provide assistance to the Maroney family. Catherine shared this letter with the authorities and also recounted an incident that happened on the day Mary Agnes was kidnapped. After Julia left, an elderly man who said he was a social worker paid a visit. Catherine thought he might have clues about Julia, but when she mentioned calling the police and asked him to wait, he quickly dashed away and vanished. It was a puzzling encounter that Catherine had forgotten about amid all the worries about Mary Agnes. The investigators found this sudden revelation intriguing, wondering why Catherine hadn't mentioned it before. She explained that in all the stress she overlooked this peculiar encounter with the mysterious man. The police also found something unusual. 2 letters that looked like they were written by the same person were sent by 2 different women on separate days. This made the police curious. They began to suspect the Maroney family might be hiding something more serious. They thought the family could be making up stories to cover up a darker truth. They even considered the possibility that Mary Agnes might have been hurt or even killed by her parents, maybe by an accident. On May 20, 1930, the police took Catherine and Michael into custody and asked them about Mary Agnes's possible murder. However, the couple consistently stuck to their story about their daughter's kidnapping. After an hour of questioning, they were allowed to go back home. The police's search for Mary Agnes didn't yield any results, and as time went on, the progress in the case became slow, with no new leads. But just when people in the community might have started to forget about Mary Agnes, something significant happened a year later in 1931 in Rockford, Illinois. This discovery brought a fresh perspective to the case. On Thursday, July 23, 1931, About 14 months after the kidnapping, people reported seeing a girl who seemed a lot like Mary Agnes in Rockford, Illinois. A Native American lady named Martha Thompson, who was quite old, was spotted pushing a cart. Inside the cart there was a 3-year-old white girl, and they were both going towards the west. The police decided to question Martha about this. She explained that she was planning to join a circus. The little girl looked chubby and happy, and she didn't seem to be bothered by all the attention. She had a tan complexion, blonde hair, and blue eyes, just like Mary Agnes. Martha said that the little girl's mother, a woman named Florence Fuller, had abandoned her. Martha wanted to take care of the girl, but the authorities wouldn't allow it until they could confirm the girl's true identity. The authorities got in touch with the Maroney family to confirm if the baby was their missing Mary Agnes. Filled with hope, Michael and Catherine journeyed along 89 miles to Rockford to meet the little girl, hoping she might be their beloved daughter. But when they saw the little girl, Catherine began to have doubts. She closely studied the girl, examining her teeth and body, and something just didn't add up. She felt like something was missing. After careful consideration, Catherine concluded that this girl was not their daughter. One distinguishing factor was that Mary Agnes had a red mark on her arm, but the girl they met in Rockford didn't have that mark. This difference made it clear that she wasn't their daughter. This news broke Michael and Catherine's hearts all over again. Despite a lot of searching, the police couldn't find Mary Agnes. Over the years, various newspapers ran stories about the case, hoping to uncover new leads. But sadly, as time went on without any new information, the investigation came to a standstill, and the case became cold. 22 years had passed since Mary Agnes vanished. During this time, Michael and Catherine had become parents to a big family, with 5 boys bearing the names Michael Jr., Patrick, George, Harold, and William. They also had 2 daughters named Anastasia and Catherine. The media would occasionally share stories about Mary Agnes, especially when other children went missing, to keep her name in the public's attention. In 1952, a reporter named Edna Wright from the Chicago Daily News was working on a regular story about missing people in the city. While doing her research, she came across the case file of Mary Agnes's disappearance. After reading the file, Edna decided to meet with the Maroney family to get a recent picture of their children. When she looked at the photos, she noticed something important. All the family members resembled each other. This similarity caught her attention. Edna then sent copies of the family photos to a newspaper in California, hoping to find a woman who resembled the Maroney children. This woman would now be around 24 years old. Edna believed that this woman might actually be the missing Mary Agnes. The Oakland Tribune in California ran the story on February 24, 1952. In San Pablo, California, a young auto mechanic named Everett McClelland read the story and something caught his attention. Among the pictures of the 7 children, he couldn't help but be focused on Anastasia. He began to wonder how much she resembled his own wife, Mary Beck McClelland. Curiously, Mary Beck was also 24 years old and had grown up in Martinez, California. At the age of 16, after she got married, Mary Beck McClelland got a surprising revelation from a family friend that she had been adopted. Unfortunately, her father had already passed away by then. She went to her mother, Nora Beck, to ask her about it, but her mother denied it. In their quest for answers, they looked through courthouse records and uncovered Mary Beck's adoption papers. These papers showed that she was adopted in the 1930s, around the same time Mary Agnes had disappeared. This discovery led Everett to think that maybe his wife could actually be the missing Mary Agnes. Excited by the possibility, he reached out to the Oakland Tribune in California to share his thoughts about how much his wife resembled the Maroney family and how she might be the long-lost Mary Agnes. Back then, they didn't have the technology to do DNA testing like we do now, so they had to use other methods that were mostly based on theories. They collected blood samples from Michael, Catherine, and Mary Beck, and they did more than 124 tests on these samples. They also looked at their facial features and compared them. They even made models of the Maroney family's teeth and Mary Beck's teeth to compare them. They looked closely at their dental impressions. Experts in fingerprints also compared Mary Beck's fingerprints and palm prints to those of the Maroney family. All these tests and examinations showed that Mary Beck shared many family traits with the Maroney family, making it likely that she was indeed Mary Agnes. On September 4th, 1952, Mary Beck traveled to Chicago to meet the family she had been separated from for a long time. Catherine, who was now 40 years old and had been hoping for her oldest daughter, Mary Agnes, to come back home. When Mary Beth and Catherine saw each other, tears filled their eyes, and a picture was taken as they hugged tightly. It seemed like the mystery was finally solved after waiting for 22 years. However, Nora, Mary Beck's adoptive mother, strongly believed that Mary Beck wasn't kidnapped, but rather adopted. Nora explained that she had been a foster mother and knew Mary Beck well before they officially adopted her. Another person, Dr. E.W. Merrythrough, a doctor in California, claimed that he had delivered Mary Beck on November 17, 1927, and she spent her early 2 years in an orphanage before being adopted. Furthermore, an important detail that was missing came to light. Mary Agnes had a scar from a hernia operation on her belly button. This scar was not present on Mary Beck. Despite all the confusion and uncertainty, the Maroney family still embraced Mary Beck as a part of their family. Mary Beck and Anastasia quickly became close friends because they looked very similar to each other. They even dressed in similar clothes and had the same shoe size. Despite Catherine's positive opinion of Mary Beck, doubts lingered in her mind about whether Mary Beck was truly her lost daughter, Mary Agnes. In a newspaper interview, Catherine emphatically stated that Mary Beck was not the daughter she had been longing for. In 1957, Michael, who was 58 years old, passed away, carrying a heavy heart burdened by the loss of his cherished daughter, as he could never accept Mary Beck as Mary Agnes. Catherine, too, battled a haunting depression that lingered for years. Tragically, she left this world in 1962, at the young age of 49, marking the end of a journey filled with sorrow and uncertainty. As time passed, Mary Beck continued to stay connected with the Maroney family. She spent her life with them and eventually passed away in 2005, reaching the age of 77. However, throughout her life, she couldn't be certain if she truly was Mary Agnes. Then, 3 years after passing, her family decided to do a DNA test to finally settle the question of their connection to the Maroney family. The test results showed that Mary Beck's DNA didn't match the DNA of Catherine and Michael. This made it clear that Mary Beck McClellan was not Mary Agnes. Despite all this, the case remained open for the next 14 years. Finally, on June 10, 2023, a detective named Jose Rodriguez from the Cook County Sheriff's Office was given the task of investigating the Mary Agnes case. This was all part of a project led by Sheriff Tom Dart, focused on finding missing persons. Dart and Rodriguez sat down to tackle this century-old mystery together. It was the oldest missing person case in the history of Chicago. To begin their investigation, they looked for the original police reports. They decided to create a family tree and trace down as many members of the Maroney family as possible. Rodriguez shared that he started searching for family members of Mary Agnes who were not on the family tree. They also took their search online, and eventually, he stumbled upon an online forum where someone had identified themselves as a Maroney and reached out for contact. The detective uncovered an interesting lead. Some Maroney family members had accounts with DNA testing companies like Ancestry, so they decided to ask these family members to send in their DNA samples. Surprisingly, the family agreed and willingly submitted the DNA for testing. In the test results, Detective Rodriguez was on the lookout for any unfamiliar names that could be connected to the Maroney family. Interestingly, he discovered Lori Hart, who turned out to be a third cousin of the Maroney family. When he got in touch with Lori, she revealed that out of her grandmother's 3 children, Terry Arnold was the only one who had survived. When Detective Rodriguez met Terry, he showed her the DNA results and all the evidence he had gathered, proving her connection to the Maroney family. Terry couldn't believe it. All along, she had been convinced that her grandmother's family came from Poland. She was quite sure the detective must be mistaken. However, after some consideration, she agreed to take a DNA test to find out the truth. When the DNA results arrived, Terry was truly surprised. They indicated that she was mostly Irish, which was unexpected for her. Even more intriguing, the results showed significant genetic links between Terry and many of the Maroney cousins identified by Rodriguez. This strongly suggested that Terry was indeed a cousin to the Maroney family. When Detective Rodriguez inquired about her mother's name, who could potentially be the real Mary Agnes, Terry disclosed that her mother's name was Jeanette Burchard. Born on April 14, 1928, Jeanette Burchard's life took some unexpected turns. Raised by her mother, Jeanette Soleric Darris Anderson, and stepfather Frank Darris, she was brought up with strong Catholic values. Jeanette grew up well educated and later spent more than 5 decades working as a dedicated nurse. Jeanette first married Edward Jennings in the 1940s, and together they had 3 children. Decades later, after experiencing life's ups and downs, she found love once more and married Earl Burchard. Both of her husbands have since passed away. Alongside her daughter, Terry Arnold, Jeanette was a mother to Barbara Joan Jennings and Edward Clifton Jennings Jr., sadly both of whom tragically passed away, adding another tragic touch to her story. Jeanette always felt a unique connection to Chicago as she occasionally visited the city, the place where her life's puzzle was partially hidden. In an intriguing twist, Jeanette's stepfather, Frank Darris, once hinted that the woman who raised her wasn't her biological mother, leaving a lingering question that was never fully answered. This mysterious comment perplexed Jeanette throughout her life. Sadly, she left this world in 2003 at the age of 73, never having a chance to reconnect with the family she had lost. Finally, after 93 years of waiting, the Coldcase unit announced that the oldest case of Mary Agnes Maroney closed. After some time, Arnold, the daughter of Mary Agnes and the Maroney family, had multiple conversations. They expressed mutual delight in getting to know each other. Arnold even shared pictures of her mother with her newfound cousins. She strongly believes her mother would have embraced the idea of being part of this extended family, relishing in the sense of belonging. Arnold is convinced that if her mother were alive today, she would have eagerly connected with the Maroneys to share in the newfound connection and the joy it brings. A 13-year-old girl named Amanda Jane Dowler, affectionately known as Millie by her friends and family, usually took the train to Hersham after attending school in Weybridge, Surrey. But on March 21, 2002, as Millie embarked on her journey home from school around 3 p.m., something awful happened along the way, and she never reached home. Hours later, when the clock struck 7 in the evening and Millie still hadn't come home, her family grew worried. They informed the police department of Surrey about the incident and reported Millie as a missing person. What really happened to Millie? Was the loving schoolgirl ever going to come back home? Walton-on-Thames is a market town in the northwestern region of Surrey County, England. Walton rests on the south bank of Thames in the borough of Elmbridge, which is quite close to central London. The town is extremely friendly, warm, and welcoming. With pretty riverside homes and excellent schools, Walton has been listed as one of the best places to live in. Talking about the crime rate, Walton-on-Thames is the second most dangerous major town in Surrey, facing a significantly high number of violent crimes. And not so surprisingly, one of the most disheartening crimes took place in Walton back in 2002. Amanda Jane Dowler, or Millie Dowler as she was known by her family and friends, was born on June 25, 1988, to the happy couple of Bob and Sally Dowler. Millie also had an older sister named Gemma, whom she adored and looked up to. The girls got on extremely well and were practically best friends.
Friendly, very approachable. She always had a twinkle in her eyes, and she just was an infectious person that everybody wanted to be around. Once you met her for the first time, you automatically wanted to be her friend.
Being the youngest in her family, Millie was brought up with extra love and care, which contributed to her becoming a kind and generous person. Gemma described her sister as friendly and vivacious, with a sparkle in her eye. During the early 2000s,
Millie Dowler's disappearance, one of the most notorious of the last decade.
Millie attended Heathside School in Weybridge, Surrey, and being the bubbly girl she was, she made a lot of friends, but one of them stood out in particular. Millie met Hannah McDonald on a school trip to Germany in 2002, and both the girls instantly became friends. In the following years at school, Millie and Hannah became inseparable. They would do everything together, whether it was homework, shopping, or simply lunch. Hannah and Millie became a part of each other's families. By this time, Millie had developed a keen interest in music.
Millie's family had to wait 6 months to recover her body, and all this time later they finally know who did it.
This was an incredibly emotional moment for the Dowler family.
Millie loved spending time playing the saxophone, often with her close friends around. Millie was a bright light in the lives of those around. She loved to cheer others up when they were having a bad day, and did that effortlessly. On Thursday, March 21, 2002, Millie said goodbye to Hannah and left Heathside School in Weybridge, Surrey. At 3:07 p.m., she walked to Weybridge railway station with another friend that day. The two girls got off at the Walton-on-Thames railway station. This was one stop before Hersham, which was Millie's usual stop for her journey home. Millie and her friend had decided to grab a bite together at the station cafe before going home. They just wanted to enjoy a conversation over some good food. Once they were done, Millie called up her father at 3:47 p.m. and informed him about the delay. Before hanging up, she promised him that she would be back home in the next 30 minutes. By 4:05, Millie and her friend parted ways and set off home. Unfortunately, only one of the girls made it home that evening. Millie's family awaited her arrival, but hours went by and there were no signs of her. As each minute passed, the Dowlers grew more and more worried about their youngest.
And then I got in at about, I think it was like 5 o'clock. Dad was in the office and I was like, "Where's Millie?" And then he was like, "Oh, she's supposed to be home by now. I thought you would have picked her up." And then as soon as I heard Dad say she's not home, I was just like, oh God. I don't know whether it was like sisterly instinct, but I definitely knew I was never going to see her again.
Tension had already started to set in, and soon, Millie's family were sure that something awful had happened. At 7 p.m., Bob, Millie's father, called up the authorities in Sussex and reported Millie as missing. Detective Chief Superintendent Craig Denholm from the police department of Sussex pulled together a team and led a massive search for Millie. The team included dozens of helicopters and more than 100 police officers searching the fields, streets, and rivers around Hersham. Even the detectives who had earlier worked on abduction cases were called in for help. A week after Millie's disappearance, the police had gathered a few facts related to Millie's disappearance. Millie was last seen around 4:10 p.m. by a friend of Gemma, Millie's sister, when she was waiting at the bus stop. Gemma's friend stated that she recognized Millie when she saw her walking along Station Avenue. Even though there was a CCTV camera located further along the road, it showed no images of Millie. This indicated that Millie had disappeared within minutes after crossing the bus stop. A car, specifically a red Daewoo Nexia, was photographed driving past the same camera at 4:32 p.m., just 20 minutes after Millie was last seen. Although there was no proof that this car had anything to do with Millie's disappearance, the detectives found it suspicious. Police and the Dowler family together made appeals to the media for information about their missing girl, Millie. Millie's parents were interviewed many times, where they urged people to be on the lookout for Millie and come forward if they have any information which could lead them to her. But sadly, these appeals and interviews were in vain. While nothing helpful came from those interviews, the police started to look at other possibilities. They stated that there was a high chance that Millie was probably not taken by force. They were so sturdy that Millie might have run away on her own will, not necessarily with someone. They backed this theory up by stating that even though a number of people had seen Millie before she went missing, nobody had seen her being in a struggle with anyone. Sally Dowler, Millie's mother, only hoped that her daughter had run away, as it was much better than all the other grim possibilities that occupied her head. However, Sally could not think of a reason why Millie would want to run away. On April 23, 2002, the detectives were informed by the discovery of a body in River Thames, Walton. The news prompted the media to speculate that the remains might be those of Millie. However, the body was identified the following day as that of a 73-year-old woman named Maisie, who went missing in March 2001. An investigation was probed into Maisie's case as well, and her death was not believed to be suspicious. By the time it was June 2002, the police were working extensively searching for Millie. A national tabloid newspaper, The Sun, even offered a reward of £100,000 available for anyone who could lead the authorities to Millie, but sadly the reward was never claimed. Despite their tireless efforts, the detectives found no clues which could help them locate Millie. On June 25, 2002, it was Millie's 14th birthday, but she remained missing. By the end of that month, the police told Millie's parents that there was a high chance that Millie was dead. In the months that followed Millie's fading investigation, something strange happened. Millie's family and the detectives monitored Millie's phone, trying to locate it, but instead, they observed some suspicious activity in Millie's voicemail box. They noted that Millie's voicemails were being listened to and deleted. In a time when Millie's family was almost convinced that she was dead, the voicemail activity gave them a ray of hope that maybe Millie is still alive and hiding somewhere. For once, after months, the Dowler family could imagine being reunited with Millie. Bob and Sally, Millie's parents, started sending texts and voicemails to Millie's phone, thinking that someday she would reply, telling them about her current condition. However, all hopes the Dowlers had gathered were brutally shattered on September 18, 2002. A few mushroom pickers passing through Yateley Heath Woods, near Yateley, Hampshire, discovered a cold and lifeless body. The body didn't have a single article of clothing on it, and it seemed like nobody had tried to bury the remains at all. Police closed the roads next to the site where the remains were found. Police officers suspected that the remains to be of Millie. They formed teams, and while some made sure the area was well guarded and secure, the others began a thorough search of the woods. Although a full forensic examination of the scene and the surrounding area was carried out to recover any evidence, no items that Millie had with her at the time of her disappearance, such as her clothing, purse, rucksack, or mobile phone, were ever recovered. However, on September 20, 2002, everyone's worst fears came true when the dental records examined by a forensic expert confirmed the remains to be of the missing 13-year-old schoolgirl, Millie Dowler.
24 hours later, police confirmed that the remains were those of the missing schoolgirl.
She compared the remains found in Yateley Heath Wood yesterday with the dental records of Amanda Dowler. We can now confirm the results of the examination was almost certainly those of the missing Amanda.
But due to the severity of the decomposition, Millie's cause of death could not be determined, but police were sure it was murder. Sometime after verifying the medical examiner's report, the police officers informed Millie's family of the horrific discovery. Bob, Sally, and Gemma's hearts were shattered to the core.
I was in the house and my mum was in the garden, and then my mum just collapsed and I was just like, oh my goodness. That was just the worst feeling, because there's absolutely nothing you can do. I can't console her. My dad couldn't console her. All she wanted was Millie back, and no one could do anything to help that. Well, we all did.
The news broke out and the media covered the full story, spreading it across the whole nation. Thousands of people mourned that day, expressing their sorrow over losing Millie. A couple of weeks later, in October 2002, Millie's family organized a memorial service for her. Dozens gathered in the lawn in front of Millie's school, dropping flowers and paying tributes to Millie. Millie was then laid to rest in Woking Crematorium in Woking Borough, Surrey, on March 21, 2003, exactly a year from the day she disappeared. The discovery of Millie's body led the police to reclassify the case as a homicide investigation, undertaken again by Surrey Police. The investigation was codenamed Operation Ruby. On November 22, 2002, the detectives set up a roadblock near the spot where Millie's body was discovered. The Surrey Police Department didn't want to leave any stones unturned, and hence re-examined the crime scene and the surrounding area to make sure they didn't miss anything out. They questioned around 6,000 motorists in the area, but no new clues or leads were discovered. Knowing that in cases such as Millie's, a family member could most likely be the perpetrator, they even considered Bob Dowler, Millie's father, a suspect. However, this string of investigation was quickly dropped, as there was no evidence linking Bob to Millie's murder. The detectives apologized for the missed opportunities their attention to this track may have caused. On March 23, 2003, detectives discovered the DNA of an unidentified male on one of Millie's clothes found in her bedroom. This gave detectives the impression that Millie's killer might have met her before, But just within 3 months, this link was ruled out by the detectives. They never shared the reason behind this decision. Even after the discovery of Millie's body, the Dowler family's suffering didn't end. The investigation into Millie's case was turning out to be a frustrating one for the detectives, but mostly for Millie's family. Beginning in 2003 itself, Millie's family and the detectives started receiving misleading and false information. This insensitive and foolish behavior not only hurt the Dowler family's sentiments, but also made the investigators go around in circles and lose valuable time. Gemma, Millie's older sister, started receiving some mischievous letters. In these letters, an unidentified person with a mischievous tone claimed to have killed Millie. He even went on to give death threats to Gemma, warning that she too would meet the same fate as her sister. Even though Gemma was in a fragile state of mind, she didn't hesitate to report these letters to the authorities. The detectives were quick to follow up and nab the author of those nasty letters. He was identified as a man named Paul Hughes. It was confirmed that he had no relation to either Gemma or Millie. Paul had sent those letters to Gemma while he was already imprisoned for indecently assaulting a 12-year-old girl. The prison service later apologized for not screening the mail effectively. Paul was convicted for his crimes against Gemma and was given an additional sentence of 5 years behind bars. Around the same time that year, a woman named Leanne Newman of Tewkesbury, Gloucestershire, repeatedly phoned Millie's parents, school, and the police. Over the phone calls, Leanne pretended to be Millie. In April 2003, she was jailed for 5 months after pleading guilty to 5 counts of making phone calls to cause annoyance, inconvenience, or needless anxiety. Every time Bob, Sally, and Gemma Dowler tried to put behind Millie's tragic death and move on with their lives, some maniac would show up and shatter their healing process. For the Dowlers, it was like someone was rubbing salt on their wounds. On July 6, 2005, a man named Levi Belfield caught the attention of the detectives' eyes. Levi was a tall, hefty man in his early 30s back in 2005, who was born and raised in southwest London. Levi Belfield was also a serial killer who had been convicted for the murders of 19-year-old Marcia McDonnell in February 2003 and 22-year-old Emile Delagrange in August 2004, and the attempted murder of 18-year-old Kate Sheedy sometime in 2004. For these crimes, which clearly took place after Millie's murder, Levi was already serving a whole life tariff, a custodial sentence handed out for the most heinous crimes, which meant that he would spend his entire life in jail. The detectives took a closer look at Levi's crimes and noted that some of them had taken place around the area that Millie was abducted from. They suspected Levi to be involved in Millie's murder as well and decided to question him.
Did you, Levi Belfield, have anything to do with the kidnap and murder of Millie Dowler?
No comment.
And you didn't deny it?
No comment.
You didn't say, it's not me?
No comment.
And at no stage over the last 2 days have you denied any involvement in these offences?
No comment.
Why is that, Levi?
No comment.
After a few minutes into the questioning, Levi was beginning to get uncomfortable with the line of questioning, which was evident from his body language and short responses.
Quite clearly that at one stage during that interview that he started to perspire quite heavily. He then took off his sweater.
His behaviour indicated to me that he was exceptionally uncomfortable with the line of questioning.
When I came out of the interview, I was convinced as I could be that he was the right man and that he was responsible.
The fact that Levi never denied killing Millie, that he was somehow connected to her murder. But this wasn't enough. They needed something solid, and for that, they reached out to Levi's past lovers. Joanna, an ex-partner of Levi, shared her disturbing experience with him and told how dangerous he was as a person. One of Levi's known surviving victims, Kate Sheedy, shared her nightmarish story as well. She stated that she was unaware that Levi had been following her in his white van while she was in the bus, and as soon as she got off the bus and walked into an isolated area, Levi rammed his van into her.
I do remember feeling the impact, just being completely winded. When it first hit me, I don't even know if I made any sound, I think barely. It then sort of reverse straight back over the same area till it was completely over my body. I just felt completely crushed.
After some turbulence and a few stir-ups, there was finally some valuable progress being made in the investigation into Millie's murder. However, things turned shaky once again in 2006 when a man named Gary Farr of Retford, Nottinghamshire, started sending emails to Millie's parents and friends repeatedly. In those emails, Gary claimed that Millie was still alive. He said that she had been smuggled out of the country to work as an entertainer at nightclubs in Poland. He even claimed that Millie's death was merely a facade to cover up what actually had happened. As a result of these misleading emails, Gary was sectioned indefinitely under the Mental Health Act on October 19, 2006, for being a serious psychological danger to the public after admitting a charge of harassment. A confirmatory investigation was launched in the following years, and on March 30, 2010, Levi was charged with Millie's abduction and murder, and as a result, an 8-year-old long search for Millie's murderer was finally over. On October 6, 2010, Levi appeared virtually in court via video and was formally charged with 1 count of attempted abduction, 1 count of abduction, 1 count of disposal of evidence, and 1 count of murder. Before the trial began, Justice Secretary Kenneth Clark rejected calls for a review of Levi's past criminal cases. Justice Kenneth said that, while Levi had been convicted of previous murders, he had to be presumed innocent in Millie's case and be found guilty by a jury in a full court process. He believed that bringing up Levi's charges for the murders of Marcia McDonnell and Emile Delagrange and the attempted murder of Kate Sheedy would prejudice the trial. To keep that from happening, the court did not allow evidence to be introduced of Levi's obsession with schoolgirls and his attempt to abduct and assault them. Levi's trial began on May 10, 2011, and concluded 6 weeks later on June 23, 2011, with the jury finding him guilty. Levi was handed another life sentence on Friday, June 24, 2011, for abducting and murdering Millie Dowler. During the course of Levi's trial in Millie's case, another old case was brought to light. Levi was being suspected of an attempted abduction of an 11-year-old girl named Rachel Collis. The incident allegedly took place in 2002, on March 20th, when Rachel was offered a lift by a man in a red car in the Walton area. However, the request for Levi's trial on this case was dismissed due to newspapers publishing articles with preconceived notions, but the judge ordered that the charge should remain on file so it can be properly investigated later. After Levi's sentencing, the Dowler family strongly criticized the treatment they faced during the trial. Millie's sister Gemma described the day that her parents were cross-examined by Levi's defense lawyer as the worst day of her life.
The way they can portray my lovely sister as a depressed teenager has shocked me terribly. The worst part being that she isn't here to defend herself. To have to listen to that was emotionally scarring. The scale seemed to be tipped so much towards the defendant rather than us, the family who have suffered an almighty loss. It feels like we are the criminals and our family has been on trial. The past 9 years have tested our relationship as a family. There have been some extremely bad days, but we still manage some good days. Sadly, it is those good days when we realise that there is someone missing. And then I will spend the rest of the next day feeling guilty for enjoying myself. In my eyes, justice is an eye for an eye. You brutally murder someone, you should pay the ultimate price, a life for a life. So in my eyes, no real justice has been done. He took away my beautiful sister and he will now spend the rest of his time living off of taxpayers' money.
Sally, Millie's mother, told reporters that the trial had been a truly awful experience for her and her family. She said that they had to hear Millie's name being defamed in court, as Levi's defense lawyers tried to portray Millie as an unhappy, depressed young girl. Sally reassured that Millie was none of those things at all. She was a happy, vivacious, fun-loving girl.
At last, the man responsible for the cruel murder of our darling daughter so many years ago has been found guilty. However, for us, the trial has been a truly awful experience. We have felt that our family, who have already suffered so much, has been on trial as much as Mr. Belfield. To actually see that man in court, a man capable of such a vile and inhuman crime, has been grotesque and distressing for us. The length the system goes to protect his human rights seems so unfair compared to what we as a family have had to endure. I hope, whilst he is in prison, he is treated with the same brutality he dealt out to his victims, and that his life is a living hell.
Sally was upset that her family's life had been scrutinized and laid open for everyone to inspect. The Dowlers were snatched of their right to privacy and made to sit through the painful trial, day after day, in order to get an evil man convicted of their beloved Millie's brutal murder. Bob, Millie's father, criticized how Levi refused to appear physically in court and to give evidence for his sentencing. He was disgusted by the fact that he was questioned about his relationship with his own daughter. Bob added that his family had to pay too high a price for Levi's conviction.
Pleased that a guilty verdict has been delivered by the jury and that Levi Belfield has been convicted of the murder of our daughter. However, we do not see this as true justice for Millie, merely a criminal conviction. My family has had to pay too high a price for this conviction. The trial has been a truly mentally scarring experience on an unimaginable scale. You'd have had to have been there to truly understand. Things that you would not believe could ever happen did in fact happen. The defence inferences about myself and my wife were hugely distressing. And yet again, Belfield has been spineless and gutless by not attending his sentencing in court. Thank goodness that we have so many close and wider family members and friends who have supported us through the past 9 years. Tomorrow, Saturday the 25th of June, would have been Millie's 23rd birthday. And as always, we will remember the happy, fun-loving and talented girl that she was, but who was never allowed to fulfill her potential. This is a gap in our lives that can never be filled.
Bob was hurt that the trial had been a truly mentally scarring experience for him and his family. Bob also revealed that when he and his family were being questioned, it made them feel as if they were the ones on trial, not Levi. Bob further shamed the judicial system for being so loaded in favor of the perpetrator of the crime. When the news that the Dowlers were mistreated and harshly cross-examined in the courtroom broke, it led to a debate over how victims and witnesses were treated in court. On July 4, 2011, it was discovered that Millie's voicemails had been accessed and altered by journalists working for a newspaper that went by the name of News of the World. The newspaper's private investigator, Glenn Muclair, was particularly criticized. It was revealed that during the police investigation into the newspaper's phone hacking activities, detectives discovered that journalists had deleted some messages in Millie's voicemail box, which could have been potential evidence in Millie's case. They did so because the mailbox was full, and they wanted to free up space for new messages so they could listen to them. This was the reason why, back in 2002, after noticing activity in Millie's voicemail box, the Dowler family thought that Millie was still alive, even after her disappearance, which, as it turned out, was not the case at all. The phone hacking scandal earned the anger of the Prime Minister, David Cameron, who called it a truly dreadful act. In response to the British public's outcry, several inquiries were conducted into phone hacking and media ethics. The newspaper itself was closed in 2011 as a direct result of the outrage. The Prime Minister David Cameron sat down with Millie's family to have a discussion over the press hacking incident.
3 long years have passed since my meeting with David Cameron and the other party leaders. We were pleased he was prepared to initiate the Leveson inquiry into press ethics. However, I have not forgotten the promises that were made to my family and all of the other victims of press intrusion.
Bob and Sally, Millie's parents, announced they would pursue a claim for damages against the News of the World. In September 2011, it was reported that the Dowler family had been offered £2 million in personal damages. In January 12th, it was reported that Surrey police and other police forces were made aware soon after Millie's death that News of the World staff had accessed her voicemail box, but the detectives did not publicly address this information. Instead, a senior Surrey officer invited the newspaper staff to a meeting to discuss the case and settle things in secret. Millie's family felt even more cheated after learning about this situation. A red Daewoo Nexia, which was photographed driving past the same camera that captured Millie shortly after she was abducted, belonged to Levi's then-girlfriend Emma Mills. Levi said that he was driving the car at that time. On January 27, 2016, Surrey police announced that Levi had admitted to the abduction, assault, and murder of Millie Dowler. However, on February 12, 2016, Levi changed his story and declined that he had ever confessed to assaulting and murdering Millie. Millie's death had a great impact on her parents, Bob and Sally. Even though their beloved daughter was now gone, they wanted to make sure that nothing similar would happen to any other child. Sally and Bob launched a charity called Millie's Fund on the day of her memorial service. The charity provided risk assessment advice to teenagers, youth workers, and educators, and aimed at promoting public safety of children and young people. About a couple of years after Millie's body was discovered, Heathside School, where Millie was a student once, gathered a team together and built a memorial garden for Millie and named it Amanda Dowler Memorial Garden. It followed a paved pattern around borders, planted with flowers and shrubs, and had benches for people to stop by and remember Millie. Sally and Bob Dowler, together with her sister Gemma, were present at the moving ceremony when the garden was first opened for the public. The school staff and some governors also attended. The Reverend Nick Whitehead concluded the official opening with a prayer and a blessing. The principal thanked all the individuals, businesses, and organizations that offered a helping hand in converting the dream of making a memorial garden for Millie into a reality. School principal Glenn Willoughby said that he believed that a lot of people in Walton needed a place of peace and tranquility. At the school, the students and staff can visit to remember Millie and to have some space and time to reflect on anything that may be on their mind. On June 29, 2017, Gemma, Millie's sister, released a book dedicated to Millie entitled it My Sister Millie.
I think that when we first lost Millie, I didn't realise how lovely our family was. And so that's what has kept me fighting all of this time. And the only book I wanted to write would have been from love and my courage as well, and to make sure that when my children read about it, not that I have them in the future, they will be able to read about it through the words that I've chosen rather than a newspaper.
Gemma wrote the book in loving memory of her little sister and to express how much she missed her. In the book, Gemma talked about how Millie's chance at having a beautiful childhood and life was snatched away from her and how it impacted the Dowler family.
And at the centre of it all, a young teenager with her whole life ahead of her, taken in the most awful way.
Gemma also shed light on her family's journey of going from extreme pain to healing and achieving closure. It came as cold comfort to the Dowlers and the family of Levi's other victims that he will never be free again. Levi became the only person ever to have been handed 2 separate whole-life tariffs in British history. Levi is behind bars at HM Prison, Franklin, in County Durham. The prison is commonly referred to as the Monster Mansion due to many of its inmates being convicted murderers and high risk in general. Levi has now converted to Islam and now goes by the name Yusuf Rahim. But no matter what he does, he will never set foot out in the free world. Even after more than 20 years of Millie's disappearance, Hannah McDonald, Millie's best friend from school, is still close to Millie's family. For years, Hannah bottled up her grief thinking about how her best friend was robbed of a wonderful life. Hannah still misses Millie, who will always hold a special place in her heart. Do you think there are any more unsolved murders that Belfield might have committed? How do you think the detectives handled Millie's case? Could they have been more efficient? Let us know your thoughts. We'd love to hear from you.
And they talked for a little bit, and then they hung up, and shortly, maybe 15 minutes, he called again, and she told him she was leaving. I knew that something was wrong.
On December 13th, 1976, at 7:45 p.m., 16-year-old Carol Hutto received a phone call that filled her with happiness and excitement. After the call, She quickly told her mother, Norma Hutto, that she was heading to a nearby store, which was only a short 10-minute walk away, and would be back in about a half an hour. Little did her mother know it would be the last time she laid eyes on her beloved daughter. Carol never returned home after that.
It's simple, Jim. You're sorry or you did it intentionally. That's all I'm asking. I don't need... Jim, are you sorry you killed Carol? That's all I'm asking, Jim. You're sorry, aren't you?
Following this interrogation is a truth which took 24 long years to finally come to light. Who could be behind that mysterious call? How did Carol disappear suddenly without any trace? Carol disappeared from Largo, Florida, a lively place known for its friendly community and sunny climate. This city is located in Pinellas County and has a blend of city comforts and beautiful natural surroundings. With a population of over 82,000 people, Largo has a long past and lots of fun things to do. It is a friendly place for people who live there and those who come to visit. But in 1976, a crime took place that changed everything here. Let's rewind the clock back in time to February 6, 1960, the very day a sweet little girl entered this world. Born to Edward and Norma Hutto in the cozy town of Largo, Florida, she was given the name Carol Dean Hutto. As the youngest in the family, she was showered with affection and attention by everyone. Growing up, Carol attended Largo High School, where her kind and gentle nature made her a beloved figure among her peers. Carol's family was quite a crew. She had a half-brother, Jerry Hutto, and while we don't know a lot about him, what was clear was that Carol and Jerry shared a close and special bond. Jerry deeply cared for his sister, and he always went out of his way to fulfill her wishes. Whatever Carol asked for, Jerry did his best to make it happen, showing the strong connection they had as siblings. Besides Jerry, Carol had 4 more siblings, 2 sisters, Pamela Beale Hutto and Melinda Darlene Hutto, and 2 other brothers, Maurice Barnett Hutto and Frank Hutto. Carol was a girl who brought joy to her family, especially her mother. They enjoyed doing activities like going to thrilling NASCAR races and exciting wrestling matches. Her mom fondly remembers her as a devoted Christian who chose her friends carefully. Carol had big dreams and a heart full of adventure, but sadly, she didn't get the chance to fully experience them and live those dreams. On December 13, 1976, Carol Hutto was spending time at her home on Corvette Drive with her mother, Norma, and her half-brother, 17 years old Jerry Irwin. Everything seemed like a usual evening. They were all enjoying themselves, sharing jokes and laughter. Norma was busy preparing dinner for the family, and Jerry was getting ready for a date. However, their evening took an unexpected turn when the phone in the house started ringing. Norma went to pick up the call, and it turned out to be Carol's friend on the line, so she handed the phone to Carol, and they spent a few minutes whispering to each other, but when Norma came back, she quickly ended the call. Strangely, after the call, Carol's mood took a sudden turn. She became incredibly happy and excited, which caught Norma's attention. Carol hurriedly went to her room, fixed her hair, and checked her appearance in the mirror. After about 15 minutes, she told her mom that she was heading to a store nearby, which was just a 10-minute walk away from their house. Even before Norma could ask what she needed from the store, Carol was already out the door. However, before leaving, Carol made a promise that she would be back soon. Later, Carol's half-brother Jerry also left the house for his date and said goodbye to Norma. The store was not too far away, and it usually took about 20 minutes or even less for Carol to walk there and back. So Norma expected Carol to return home in a half an hour. But after 1 hour had passed and Carol still hadn't come back, Norma started to wonder if Carol had bumped into her friends on the way and was chatting with them, which might be why she was taking longer. But after 2 hours had passed and Carol hadn't come back, Norma became even more anxious. It was getting dark outside, and Carol's absence was concerning because she had never missed her curfew before.
I knew when Carol didn't come home. In a couple of hours, like she said, I'll be back. I won't be gone long. I knew that something was wrong.
At around 10 p.m., when Jerry arrived home, Norma, deeply concerned, asked if she had seen Carol. However, Jerry was clueless about her whereabouts, just like Norma. Upon learning that Carol hadn't returned home since she left, Jerry became even more worried. Norma urged him to go out and search for her. He started combing the streets calling out her name, but didn't receive any responses. He even went to the store near their house, where Carol was supposed to go. But the store staff mentioned that they hadn't seen her today, which led to the concerning questions of where Carol might be if she didn't go to the store as planned. Jerry sadly returned home and shared the unfortunate news with Norma that he couldn't find Carol anywhere. Despite their concern, they decided to wait until morning, hoping Carol might come back home on her own. However, as the morning sunlight arrived, Norma became even more anxious because there was still no sign of Carol. Without delaying any further, Norma decided to call the police to report Carol as missing. However, the police informed her that since less than 24 hours had passed since Carol went missing, they couldn't file a missing person report. At this point, they also considered the possibility that Carol might have run away from home.
She said, there's nothing we can do. Girls run away all the time. I tried to tell her that Carol didn't run away. She had nothing to run away from. She was happy. She didn't have any problems.
But Norma wasn't ready to accept that Carol would ever leave her home on her own or run away from her family. She had a strong feeling that something bad had happened to her daughter. Because of this, Norma and Jerry didn't want to sit and wait for the police to do something about it. They decided to take matters in their own hands and actively search for Carol themselves. They went around their neighborhood, talking to neighbors to see if anyone had seen Carol the previous night. Most of the neighbors remembered seeing Carol around 8 p.m. when she left home, but no one had spotted her coming back home that night. Norma and Jerry also visited all of Carol's friends' houses to find out if she had spoken to anyone or gone to their homes, but they couldn't find any trace of her. The sudden disappearance of Carol deeply affected Norma, and the entire community also came together after the news that their little Carol was missing to help in any way they could. At the same time, the police were also actively searching for Carol. They checked various stores, both nearby Carol's house and more distant, to see if she had visited any of them that night. Unfortunately, no one could confirm seeing her at any of those locations. The police noticed that there was a security camera outside the store that Carol was supposed to go. However, upon reviewing the footage, they couldn't find any evidence of Carol visiting the store on the night she disappeared. Back in those days, security cameras were not as common as it is today, so only a few stores had installed them, making it challenging to track Carol's movements. But it didn't take long for a tragic discovery to occur. On the evening of December 14th, 1976, Carol's half-brother Jerry stumbled upon her lifeless body under unusual circumstances. He had been searching the neighborhood on his own, desperately trying to find Carol. His search led him to the end of the street near a building that was still under construction. This building was located at 418 Imperial Drive, close to a lake. It was there that Jerry claimed to have discovered Carol's body. The details surrounding how he came across her in the specific spot remained a mystery.
And I just kind of glanced out at the lake, and I saw some clothes and a raincoat, and I believe one shoe. It was over in this area right here. They were just floating in the water. So I turned and I started looking closer, and I looked down, and that's when I saw her face down in the water with cement blocks on top of her.
Carol's lifeless body was found floating in the water, her clothes partially removed. This sight was shocking and deeply disturbing for Jerry. He immediately contacted the Largo police to report the discovery, and then had the difficult task of returning home to inform Norma about the heartbreaking news.
How do you tell your parents that their baby daughter is in a lake face down? You just can't do it.
And I said, Jerry, what's wrong? And he just stared. And I got a hold of him and I said, Jerry, what's wrong? And he said, we got to go, Daddy. We got to get her.
When the police arrived, they carefully retrieved Carol's body from the lake to preserve any potential evidence. It became evident quite quickly that Carol's death wasn't accidental. The presence of injuries on her body, and the concrete block used to submerge her indicated foul play, suggesting that someone intentionally killed her and attempted to hide her body. The police believe that the attack likely occurred at the under-construction house, and then her body was placed in the lake. A crucial clue was Carol's watch, which was stopped at 10:36 p.m., indicating the time of her murder was likely between 10:30 and 10:45 p.m. After Carol's lifeless body was sent for a thorough autopsy, some unsettling facts came to light. The coroner found that Carol had been strangled, which likely made her lose consciousness, but didn't kill her right away. Additionally, she had suffered from a blow to the head with a heavy object, resulting in a severe injury. Adding to the distressing findings, Carol also had a significant burn on her thigh. The medical examiner's report uncovered an even more horrifying detail. When Carol was thrown into the water and the heavy concrete block was placed over her body, she was still alive. Despite the harrowing circumstances, she remained conscious and tragically succumbed to drowning over time. During the examination of Carol's body, the coroner also discovered 3 long hairs that were of the same person but seemed to belong to someone other than her. Additionally, a 4th hair, unidentified and possibly belonging to the killer, was found on Carol's blue jeans. This discovery held the potential to be a crucial breakthrough in the case. However, the limitations of medical technology in the 1970s meant that not much could be done with the hairs at that time. So they were carefully stored away, awaiting the development of more advanced techniques that could help identify the person responsible for Carol's tragic fate. For a little while, the Largo police had their eyes on Jerry Irwin, Carol's half-brother, because he was also outside on the night Carol was killed. Even though Jerry said he was on a date, the police discovered he got done half an hour earlier than he claimed. This made them wonder, what was he doing during that time gap? The restaurant he went to was only about 8 minutes away from home, so why didn't he return home soon? The police started thinking that Jerry might be involved in Carol's death, since he couldn't provide an alibi for that time gap. They concentrated their investigation on him, but it didn't lead to any solid evidence. They couldn't find any proof that Jerry could have hurt Carol. Norma, Carol's mother, was convinced that Jerry cared deeply for his sister and would never hurt her. Despite their initial suspicion, the focus on Jerry didn't bring them any closer to the truth. After a while, the police cleared Jerry of suspicion as they couldn't find any more evidence against him. For the next 18 months, the police put a lot of effort into exploring every lead, but unfortunately they couldn't find any clues to solve the case, and the investigation only went in circles. As time went on, the investigation began to lose momentum, and the case grew cold. This left the Hutto family with aching questions. What really happened to Carol on that fateful night? Who was responsible for her death? They not only suffered the loss of their beloved daughter, but also the frustration of not finding justice for her. For almost 20 years, the mystery of Carol's murder remained unsolved, but in March 1994, a twist of fate brought a fresh set of eyes to the case. Officer Brad Hoyes, sidelined by a work injury, found himself poring over Coldcase files during his desk duty. As he sifted through the forgotten files, he stumbled upon the haunting details of Carol Hutto's murder case, reigniting a dormant investigation. As Officer Brad delved into the case, he sensed that there were hidden layers that hadn't received thorough scrutiny during the original 1976 investigation. Driven by his intuition, he made the bold decision to reopen the case and retrieve the evidence box that had been stowed away for years. Among the contents, he stumbled across Carol's personal diary. Officer Brad saw potential in those pages, hoping the diary might hold the missing pieces needed to unravel the mystery of Carol's tragic end.
So I open it up, and it begins about a month before her death.
A few pages into the diary, Carol wrote about her secret romance with her classmate. It was back in 1976 when Carol was 16 years old. She had a major crush on a 17-year-old boy, James Brian Kuhn, born July 20th, 1959, also known as Jimmy Kuhn. They both were juniors at Largo High School and used to talk to each other all the time at school. The whispers of their closeness spread among the school corridors, but they chose to play it cool and never openly acknowledged their relationship. It was Kuhn who asked Carol to keep the relationship a secret, as his family was really strict, so they decided to hide it from everyone. At one point, Carol also claimed that she was so in love with Kuhn.
I finally got to a point where it said, I met Jimmy at the lake, and it just was too close to home. That's where her body was found. It was right next to the house that we believe the crime occurred in.
Kuhn was also among the attendees at Carol's funeral, who appeared genuinely sorrowful and far from a suspect. In 1976, during the initial investigation, Kuhn was also questioned as a friend of Carol, and he claimed he hadn't seen or spoken to her on the night of the murder, asserting that he was at home the entire time. However, in 1994, when Coldcase detectives revisited the case, they spotted a discrepancy between Kuhn's statements and what the Hutto family had originally told the police. They revealed that on the fateful night of December 13, 1976, Carol had received a phone call from none other than Jimmy Kuhn.
I answered the phone, and he said, Mrs. Hutto, this is Jim. Can I speak to Carol? And I said, yes, just a minute. And they talked for a little bit, and then they hung up, and shortly, maybe 15 minutes, he called again, and she told him she was leaving.
By this time, Kuhn was 34 years old and had become a father to a daughter. Following his graduation, he pursued a path in the U.S. Navy, where he achieved significant success. His military career was marked by his role as a submariner, stationed at the U.S. Naval Submarine Base in Connecticut. Largo Detective Sergeant Mike Short, age 43, had a personal connection to the case. He too had attended the same Largo High School as Kuhn and Carol, so when he got to know about the case, he took the lead in investigating Carol's murder. Working alongside him was Lieutenant John Carroll, who is currently Largo's deputy chief. In a bold move, they made an unexpected trip to Connecticut, where Kuhn, an 11-year military veteran, was stationed. During this encounter, Kuhn's story drastically changed. He contradicted his earlier statements and confessed that he had indeed seen Carol on the night of her disappearance.
What I want to know is, were the two of you together that night? And was she okay when you left? That's what I want to know. Yes.
He admitted that he had been with Carol on the night she went missing. That was a significant admission. And we knew at that time we had our suspect.
He barely remembered anything, Sergeant Mike Short recalled. According to Mike, Kuhn explained, "I put up walls. If I remember, I'm going to jail." These words left a strong impression on Mike, leading him to believe that he had identified Carol's killer. However, the following day, Kuhn changed his stance. He sought legal advice, refused further interviews, and declined to take a polygraph test. The police and prosecutors faced a challenge as they lacked enough evidence to definitively prove that Kuhn was the one who had killed Carol on the night of December 13, 1976. Convicting him of first-degree murder seemed unlikely, due to the statute of limitations. Anything less than first degree might result in Kuhn going free. However, the evidence box held an even more intriguing discovery. Among the items in the box, Detective Mike came across a collection of unfamiliar hairs, retrieved from both Carol's body and the crime scene, and these hairs had been diligently preserved. During the late 1980s, a pivotal moment in forensic science emerged, which was the utilization of DNA testing to establish whether someone was guilty or innocent in criminal investigations. As the 1990s progressed, the approach shifted towards examining mitochondrial DNA, which resides in small structures within human cells and is more likely to endure the test of time. Given these advancements, Mike was eager to conduct a genetic test on the hairs to potentially unveil the true identity of the perpetrator. However, there was a problem. They didn't have a sample of Kuhn's DNA, which was a crucial element for the testing. To obtain this vital piece of evidence, the detectives needed to obtain Kuhn's blood through a legal search warrant. With this plan in mind, they aimed to maximize the time spent with the suspect and decided to proceed strategically.
If we're going to serve a search warrant on Jimmy Kent, then use that opportunity for an interrogation as well.
In 1998, Detective Mike decided to bring in the reinforcements in the form of the Naval Criminal Investigation Service, or NCIS. They thought the presence of naval officials might make Kuhn nervous and lead him to a confession. On July 15, 1998, Detective Mike waited outside the police interrogation room while Navy investigators Tom Azimos and Dave Early sat down with their murder suspect, James Kuhn. After obtaining the necessary warrant, they first collected a blood sample from Kuhn for further testing. Then Azimos and Early began their conversation with Kuhn, aiming to make him feel supported and comfortable. Their goal was to build trust so that he might open up and gradually reveal the truth.
Simple, Jim. You're sorry or you did it intentionally. That's all I'm asking. I don't need... Jim, are you sorry you killed Carol? That's all I'm asking, Jim. You're sorry, aren't you? I can say you're sorry, Jim. That's all it's going to take.
We know that you didn't mean for this to happen, did you?
You didn't do this intentionally, did you? It was a mistake, right? You didn't plan it. Jim? It's a mistake, wasn't it, Jim? It's an accident. That's what we need to explain.
Brother, you just got to get it out.
At this moment, the NCIS agents were confident that Kuhn was on the verge of disclosing what happened on the night of December 13, 1976. Surprisingly, without any solid proof, they managed to make Kuhn break down as he wiped away his tears and finally revealed the heartbreaking truth about how he killed his girlfriend, Carol Hutto.
It was an accident. The only reason I went to the lake was to try to cover it up.
I understand.
Send it somewhere else.
I understand, Jim. We understand that. How did she get hurt in the house?
We were playing around and started chasing each other. She tripped and fell.
Okay. What happened then?
She's unconscious. I didn't hear a heartbeat or anything. And I tried to cover it up like it was something else or somebody else.
What did you do then?
That's when I took her clothes off.
Okay.
And I took her out by the lake.
What'd you do with her down by the lake?
That's when I put her in the water. I just put a bunch of rocks on top of her and then I took off.
Although Kuhn appeared emotional, the experienced Coldcase detectives weren't convinced of his honesty. The injuries Carol sustained, particularly to her neck and head, didn't align with a simple accident like tripping and falling. Instead, the nature of these injuries indicated blunt force trauma and strangulation. However, Kuhn had confessed to causing Carol's death. Although he claimed it was an accident, he took the responsibility for her demise, explaining that he failed to help her and attempted to conceal both the evidence and her body. As a result, Kuhn was taken into custody and anticipated his trial. However, on the eve of his trial, he presented a new version of events. In his alternative version of events, Kuhn initially claimed that there were no physical interactions between him and Carol, even though he wanted it. However, things took a different turn when Carol disagreed, and their disagreement escalated into a physical confrontation. Carol started screaming and fighting back by scratching and hitting him. Fearing her screams would draw attention, Kuhn struck her with a 2x4 piece of wood and even tightened his grip around her throat. When he finally let go, Carol fell to the floor, unconscious. Kuhn was panicked and unsure, so he made a hasty decision to hide her body. He also tried to create confusion by burning her thigh, hoping it would appear as though someone else had attacked her. Regardless of the details in Kuhn's different versions of events, detectives arrived at the same conclusion, that Carol had been assaulted, taken to the lake, and thrown face down. Her body was weighed down with a concrete block to keep it submerged. Interestingly, the second story Kuhn shared appeared more plausible and aligned better with the evidence discovered. This version of events seemed to match the physical evidence and circumstances surrounding Carol's tragic fate. As the trial day arrived on February 9, 2000, the prosecutors aimed for a first-degree murder conviction against Kuhn. His lawyers acknowledged that he had some involvement in the crime, but they argued that a more fitting verdict could be manslaughter or even third-degree murder. When the jury received the case, they took just 22 minutes to deliberate. Before reaching a verdict, Kuhn was found guilty of first-degree murder.
Case number 98-12339, I do adjudicate Mr. Ken guilty. I sentence him to life in prison without the possibility of parole for 25 years.
There's a chance that Kuhn could experience freedom once more. Due to the fact that the crime occurred in 1976, Pinellas Pasco Circuit Court Judge Philip Federico applied the state laws from that year. These laws allow someone convicted of first-degree murder to be considered for parole after 25 years. Interestingly, Kuhn chose not to address the court during the sentencing. But Norma Hutto, Carol's mother, felt the need to address Kuhn. She expressed how Carol had trusted him and called him out, saying, "James Kuhn, you took the trust Carol gave you, and you used it for your depraved wants." Norma's words did not stop there. She pointed out that Kuhn had attended Carol's funeral, pretending to be upset and acting like her friend, while hiding his true intentions. Norma hoped that he would never leave prison and didn't deserve a chance to start anew, emphasizing that he had taken that chance away from her daughter. Norma, a mother with high hopes for her young daughter Carol, had envisioned a bright future. She eagerly anticipated the day when Carol would proudly graduate from Largo High School. She had dreams of seeing her 16-year-old wearing a stunning white dress, walking down the aisle to embark on a joyful journey with her husband, and maybe even starting a family. However, all those dreams were shattered in a single night, and strongly desired that Kuhn would remain in prison forever, never to be released. So, let's talk about Kuhn's case. What are your thoughts on whether he deserved a life sentence or not? And do you think he was really sorry about what he did? And do you believe Kuhn's actions towards Carol were accidental, or was it all planned out? On the evening of April 28, 2001, the police were out in the wooded area of Hibbs Park, 59th Street at Kensington Avenue, Kansas City, Missouri, searching for an elderly man who was reported missing by his friend. But instead of finding the man, they stumbled on a horrible discovery of a decapitated body of a female toddler in the woods. On May 1, 2001, the child's missing head was found wrapped in a plastic bag about 200 yards from where her decapitated body was found. The head had decomposed beyond recognition, and no one had reported the child missing. Since her identity was unknown, the police gave her a name, Precious Doe. This discovery came with a lot of unanswered questions. Who was this child? Why had she been murdered in such a horrific way? Kansas City, Missouri is known for its vast prairies, rolling hills, and natural beauty. Kansas is blessed with a lot of cultural attractions, which include museums and art galleries. It is appropriately nicknamed the Sunflower State, with over 20 designated wildflower trails which can be found all over the state in both rural and urban areas. With a population over 500,000 people, Kansas City has a high violent crime rate of 57 per 1,000 residents, making it one of the cities with a high crime rate in America. And in this city, our story begins. On April 4, 2001, Michelle and Harold went to Betty's place again to pick up Erica for a family reunion. Betty was reluctant to release the little girl because of how much she loved her, and also because she prepared for Erica to spend the Easter holiday with her, as Easter was just around the corner. But Betty had no choice, since Michelle was the biological mother. Betty packed up Erica's things, including her favorite doll, and the new dresses she bought for her to wear on Easter. She bid Erica farewell, unknown to her that it was the last time she would see her. Harold also had children before he met Michelle, which was probably why they both agreed to take the youngest of their children with them to Kansas City, Missouri. Harold took his 6-month-old child, Markeisha Johnson. They didn't take all of their children with them to Kansas City for different reasons. One, because the apartment in Kansas belonged to LaWanda Driscoll, Harold's cousin, and also because Michelle already had her other 4 children elsewhere. Weeks passed, and LaWanda Driscoll, Harold's cousin, soon noticed that she wasn't seeing Erica around. She asked Michelle about Erica's whereabouts, and she told LaWanda that Betty Brown had come from Oklahoma to take Erica. On the evening of April 28, 2001, the police received a call from an unknown man who said he's been trying to reach his friend for a while but couldn't get through to him. He asked that the police help him to conduct a welfare check on his friend, which the police did, but as they were unable to find the man at his residence, they had to search the wooded area near Hibbs Park, 59th Street at Kensington Avenue, Kansas City, Missouri. After searching for a while, the police got a call that the man they were looking for had been found. But as they were about to leave, they stumbled upon a horrific sight. It was the decapitated body of a toddler. In no time, the police had determined that the body belonged to a female toddler because the body was found naked. The police immediately found the discovery suspicious. They wondered why a toddler's body would be lying in the woods, and also wondered why no one reported that child of her age was missing in the area. The investigators were left at a dead end. Without the body's head, there was no way the investigation would progress. All they could do was determine the age and the sex of the child. They found out that the lifeless body belonged to a black female of about 3 to 6 years of age, and also that she had been abused before she was murdered. May 1, 2001, 3 days after the body was found, a volunteer searcher found the child's head wrapped in a plastic bag about 200 yards from where her body was discovered. Beside the body was an ashtray that the police believe was the murder weapon. But even with the head found, the police could not identify the owner of the body, as the head decomposed beyond recognition. The murder soon gained national attention due to the age of the victim and how gruesome it was. The investigators continued with their investigation and hoped that the parent or guardian of the child would come forward to claim her body, but no one came. When the victim's identity could not be established, the victim was dubbed Precious Doe. Soon, many members of the public volunteered to spread the word about Precious Doe through flyers, radio, television, and papers, and even went door to door to ask questions that could provide a link to the victim's identity. The case was featured on America's Most Wanted and Coldcase files many times to identify the little girl. But even after all that, no witnesses came forward and nobody claimed the child. In December 2001, members of the public raised money for Precious Doe's funeral, which was held at Hibbs Park near where her body was found. The residents of the area came out in numbers as hundreds of people were in attendance. But even as much as the case garnered attention, Precious Doe's identity remained a mystery. In 2002, the police exhumed Precious Doe's body for an autopsy to be conducted, and the result shows that she had been seriously beaten with an ashtray and also abused before she was murdered. Police tested the ashtray for fingerprints and DNA, but nothing was found.
4 hours away from their families to investigate this case was hard because everybody began to feel that I don't know that we're ever going to solve it. You know, we've gone national. We've done everything we can think of doing to get this child identified, and we just had no luck.
In July 2003, investigators studied the likeness of Precious Doe's skull and also created busts that showed what she may have looked like. Due to the popularity of the case, the police constantly received tips, sometimes near and sometimes far away. At a time, the police received a call from Jamaica concerning the case, but they found out that it had nothing to do with Precious Doe's identity. Soon the police became busy with other cases, and the public lost hope. But Alonzo Washington, a vocal activist for Precious Doe's case, never stopped searching for answers. Alonzo posted adverts on the case in a local newspaper every year. In April 2005, at Precious Doe's 4th-year memorial, Alonzo thought of putting the ad in an African-American newspaper because the victim was a Black American and also made T-shirts with the bust picture of Precious Doe on it, and that became the breakthrough the case needed. On April 30, 2005, Alonzo received a call from a man named Thurman McIntosh, who was later identified as Harold Johnson's father. Claiming to know all about the Precious Doe case, Alonzo listened to the 81-year-old Thurman's words, who claimed that Precious Doe's identity was Erica Green. He also claimed that his son, Harold Johnson, killed Erica Green. Alonzo questioned Thurman about why he kept the secret since 2001 and was just revealing it in 2005. Thurman claimed that the police dismissed him whenever he called to tip them about the case. Alonzo then urged Thurman to get him a strand of Michelle's hair and also a picture of Erica. Immediately after Alonzo received a hair sample from Thurman, he sent it to Detective David Bernard, the detective who led the Precious Doe case. On May 4, 2005, Thurman was brought in for questioning, and there he told the investigators why he was sure that his son did it. When Thurman stopped seeing Erica around, he questioned Michelle and Harold about her whereabouts.
Because, as an activist, I hear about a lot of, citizens who feel like the police are not listening to their concerns.
To which they both answered that she was with Betty in Oklahoma. And suddenly, when the couple and Markeisha were relocating back to Oklahoma, Thurman said he suspected that Precious Doe was Erica Green. Thurman then confronted Harold and told him he knew he killed Erica, and Harold responded by saying that it was a mistake. As soon as Thurman knew the truth, he said he wanted to tell the whole world what happened to Precious Doe before he died. Although the picture Thurman provided was for one of Erica's cousins, the hair was a complete match to Precious Doe's. Finally, the police were able to pronounce Precious Doe as Erica Green.
The little girl we have known for 4 years as Precious Doe has a name. Erica Michelle Marie Green.
Erica Green was born on May 15, 1997, in McLeod, Oklahoma, United States of America. She was the youngest of 5 children that her mother, Michelle Johnson, had with her father, Larry Green. When Michelle was 8 months pregnant with Erica, she was convicted of larceny of merchandise from a retailer and was sentenced to 2 years of custody with the Oklahoma Department of Corrections, but was housed in Mabel Bassett Correctional Center because she was pregnant. Michelle had only served 1 month of her sentence when she fell into labor. She was taken to the OU Medical Center in Oklahoma City, where she delivered Erica Green. Unable to take care of Erica, she was asked to contact a guardian that would help her hold her baby until her release. Michelle contacted Erica's father, Larry Green, to get a guardian for their child. Larry would then call Betty Brown, a woman in her late 60s who happened to be Larry's mother's friend. Betty got to the correctional facility and was asked to do a few things to gain custody of Erica. The correctional facility authorities did not conduct a background check to know if Betty was fit to have custody of the child. She only provided her driver's license and a card from Sam's Club. She was asked to sign a form. After this was done, Betty was granted custody of Erica Green on May 16, 1997. Betty loved and cared for Erica as her own child, and she described Erica as one of the most independent children she ever met. She also said Erica was a lovely girl who was always smiling, and whenever she took Erica with her to church, people loved her. Michelle was then released on probation on October 23, 1997. According to Betty, Michelle was not so interested in taking care of Erica, as she only visited Betty Brown once in a while to check on her child. In 2000, by the time Erica was 3 years old, Michelle had already found a new lover named Harold Johnson, who she later married in 2002. Michelle soon moved in with Harold Johnson to his place in Oklahoma. Once the police confirmed that the body was Erica, they looked for her mother Michelle and her partner Harold. Both Michelle and Harold had been arrested on some warrants in Oklahoma and were in the Muskogee County Jail, Oklahoma. The police wasted no time. They immediately proceeded to the facility to question Michelle and Harold Johnson. Michelle was the first to be questioned. During the questioning, the police showed Erica's picture to Michelle, who identified her daughter and wrote a note at the back. She wrote, "Mama is sorry. You are always in my heart and soul. Love you always, little E." After she had done that, she agreed to tell the police how the murder happened. According to Michelle, on the evening of April 2001, the family arrived home around 8 p.m., and soon Harold became high on PCP and alcohol. Michelle instructed Erica, who was in the same room with Harold, to go to bed while Michelle went to the bathroom. Before she got out of the shower, Harold had begun to complain about Erica being bad because she refused to go to bed. After Harold told Erica to go to bed about 5 to 6 times, he became agitated. By the time Michelle came out of the bathroom, Erica was again out of her bed. She then ordered Erica to go back to her bed, but Erica remained standing. At that point, Harold kicked Erica till she lost consciousness. Michelle said she rushed to pick Erica up and placed her in a cold bathtub, but she wouldn't wake up. That was when Michelle knew something serious had happened. After about 15 minutes, Michelle took Erica to the bathroom and laid her on the floor, but Erica remained unconscious and unresponsive.
Put her in the bathtub. She didn't get up. She didn't respond. She didn't wake up. So I took her out the bathroom and then I laid her on the floor.
At that point, Michelle and Harold knew that Erica needed medical attention, but the two decided not to seek medical attention because they had outstanding warrants. Michelle agreed not to call an ambulance because she didn't want to go to jail, even though she knew that Erica could die. For about 10 to 14 hours, Erica was still unconscious, and by the following morning she had died. After Erica died, Harold and Michelle hid her body in a baby stroller. According to Michelle, they were both scared and didn't know what to do, so they agreed to dispose of the body eventually. They waited until it got dark to make sure no one saw them, and they both took Erica's body out through the window of the house and went straight to the woods. Harold believed that leaving the body the way it was might eventually lead the police to their home, so he thought of removing the head with hedge clippers and also disfigured the head to make recognition difficult. They wrapped the head in plastic bags and disposed of it in a dumpster at a church they found nearby. But Michelle thought that was not a good idea. She told Harold to take out the head as the smell might alert the church owners. Harold did as his wife suggested and threw the head in a wooded area at Hibbs Park. Harold then removed Erica's clothes from her body and gave them to Michelle, leaving her body in the woods. The two of them returned home and entered the room the same way they got out. No one saw what they did, but LaWanda Driscoll would soon notice that Erica was absent. She asked Michelle where she was, and Michelle lied that she was lying in the room as she was sick. After Michelle gave her account of what happened, she asked the police to take her to see Harold. She told Harold that she had already confessed to their crimes and urged him to do the same. Harold became upset at first and begged Michelle to change her statement, but Michelle's mind was already made up, as she also agreed to testify against him in court. Harold later agreed to make an oral statement where he described the way he killed Erica and removed her head. While he was being questioned, he was also shown Erica's picture, which he took and also wrote a note behind it that reads, "I'm so sorry that this happened, and I hope that you forgive me for what I have done, and I will always love you with my heart and my soul. I will always miss you, Harold Johnson." Charging the criminals in this case brought closure to many people who went all out to bring justice to Erica. In August 2005, the members of the public decided to give Erica a proper burial in her real name. Larry Green, Erica's father, unfortunately was in jail at the time. Kansas City Councilman Alvin Brooks said he and others tried to get Larry Green permission to attend his daughter's burial, but they were unsuccessful, even though Erica's family was not present at her burial.
Oh, when she left, she said, "I'll be back."
The massive number of people that helped in getting justice for her would make her happy wherever she is.
To be able to just touch what she's in. You don't know what it's like, but just to touch the casket, knowing my baby's there.
LaWanda Driscoll also gave her account of what she knew about the case. She said in the days before Erica's death, Harold had been beating her. LaWanda said the last time she heard of Erica was her scream from the bedroom. According to LaWanda, Erica cried a lot because she was not used to living with her mother and stepfather, and her tears earned her more beatings from Harold. She also said Harold would beat Erica for anything and everything, no matter how trivial it is. LaWanda mentioned she heard Harold telling Michelle, "You better go take care of your daughter, or I'm going to do something bad." About a week later, she heard a loud bang from the bedroom, which she now believes was the kick that left Erica unconscious. While everyone was looking for Precious Doe's identity, LaWanda said Michelle also helped hand out flyers to people and even cried at the girl's vigil. According to LaWanda, Michelle always had a response for anyone that asked questions concerning Erica. On May 5, 2005, Michelle and Harold were charged with the murder of Erica Green, endangering the welfare of a child, abandoning a corpse, and tampering with physical evidence. Michelle was not tried until 2007 when she pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and other related charges and was sentenced to 25 years in prison. As soon as Harold knew that Michelle was going to testify against him, he started saying things that would implicate her. he mentioned that Michelle never cared about Erica in the first place. He said Michelle would sometimes neglect Erica to go and use drugs, but everything he said is not new to the investigators. Harold didn't go to trial until 2008. Although Erica's autopsy listed her cause of death as a closed head injury, which occurs when the head hits an object, it wouldn't have been equal to first-degree murder. But the neurologist testified that Erica may have survived if she had received medical attention in the hours before her death. After a few days of deliberation, the jury found Harold guilty of first-degree murder, endangering the welfare of a child, and abusing a child. In November 2008, Harold was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Harold appealed, claiming still that he isn't the type of person the state said he is. There was back and forth between the defense attorney and the state attorney, with Harold's team claiming that the murder was not premeditated. However, the state believed that Erica's murder was premeditated. During Michelle's confession, she mentioned that on the night of Erica's murder, she told Harold not to order Erica around, and that he should only give his orders to Markeisha. The state believed that Michelle's statement annoyed Harold, and at that moment he thought of killing Erica. Also, the autopsy shows that Erica was kicked multiple times, which shows that Harold intentionally continued to kick the little girl, knowing well that she could die.
People don't know me. You just know what these people done cooked up and what I was forced to say. That's all you know. But never once have I harmed a hair on her head or did anything to hurt her.
Judge John Torrance believed that Harold showed no remorse by appealing the judgment, claiming the murder was not premeditated. The judge called Harold a textbook sociopath who won't take responsibility for his actions and therefore ruled out his appeal.
You committed acts that were ghoulish, vile, and by any measure revolting.
Though revealing Erica's identity brought closure to those who were all out for her, this sentencing was one of what brought relief to many people. Everyone that attended the sentencing for Erica was pleased with the judgment given to Harold, but some people wanted Michelle to also get the same sentence. Larry Green, Erica's biological father, also filed a lawsuit against the Oklahoma D.C., questioning the process for determining the custody of babies born to mothers in prison. The Department of Human Services and the Department of Corrections, however, agreed to adopt new procedures to ensure that babies born into inmates will be referred to the Department of Human Services for proper care. Erica Green's case is a reminder that evil resides in the heart of man. While parents are known to cherish their little ones and always protect them, it is appalling and sad to know that some parents would save themselves, not thinking about what might happen to their children. A lot of people who know about Erica's case have some things to say about the sentencing. Do you also think that Michelle should have gotten a more severe punishment because she was the biological mother? Let us know in the comment section. On Saturday, April 29, 1994, June Nicholas found her aunt, 89-year-old Lillian DeClos, dead on the bedroom floor of her yellow brick home at 1550 Northwest South Avenue in Pompano Beach, Florida. She had been beaten, assaulted, and strangled in broad daylight, and not a single person knew who did it. This tragic story would lead investigators down an unlikely path of DNA evidence and forensic investigation that revealed a shocking truth at the end. For the next 28 years, June and the rest of Lillian's family would sink deeper and deeper into a web of grief and anguish over the simple question: who would want to hurt a harmless 89-year-old woman? Our story today takes us to Pompano Beach, Florida, a picturesque city in Broward County, Florida. Pompano Beach is named after pompano, a once abundant species of fish caught off the shores of the city's beaches that boast soft golden sands and azure blue waters. Today, Pompano City is a busy city with a violent crime rate of 7.29 per 1,000 residents yearly. But in the 1990s, Pompano Beach had the highest tax rate in the country because its population and economy were not growing. Life was slow and the violent crime rate was high, at a rate of about 2,886 victims of violent crimes per 100,000 residents. But despite the crime rate in 1994, Pompano Beach was a place that an 89-year-old like Lillian DeClos could enjoy after a youth well spent. Lillian DeClos was born in 1905. As a young woman, Lillian dedicated herself to helping others, especially through her careers as a nurse and teacher. She was kind, patient, and caring, and loved by everyone who knew her, from her students and patients to her coworkers and neighbors. On the long list of people who loved Lillian was her niece June Nicholas. When June and her siblings and cousins were younger, Lillian helped care for them and teach them. As Lillian got older and started suffering from memory loss and aging-related illnesses, June took care of her, and Lillian moved to Pompano Beach in Florida to enjoy the twilight years of her life in peace. To everyone who knew her, 89-year-old Lillian DeClos was a prime example of a life well lived. Having spent her years serving her community as a teacher and nurse, Lillian spent her retirement in her yellow brick home at 1550 Northwest 7th Avenue, Pompano Beach. There she led a quiet and uneventful life by herself until violence snuck in on her through her bedroom window, shattering the peace. April 29, 1994 was a Saturday like any other for Lillian DeClos. She spent the day relaxing in her pink and white checkered nightgown, expecting a visit from her niece June later that evening. June had begun caring for her Aunt Lillian as she aged, and she would frequently visit Lillian to check on her and help with chores, keep track of medication, or keep her company. Around 6 p.m. on that fateful day, June arrived at Lillian's home as usual to check up on her and drop off some groceries she had gotten for her. When she entered the house, she couldn't find Lillian in the living room, so June called out asking where she was. June checked the first bedroom where Lillian usually took her naps, but still couldn't find her. Feeling slightly alarmed, June went down the hallway and looked into the bedroom on the right. There, lying on the floor, was her Aunt Lillian, who from all appearances was dead. June screamed and ran back up the hall to call 911. 2 officers from the Pompano Beach Police Department responded to June's 911 call, their minds racing with questions. It was not every day you heard of an 89-year-old woman getting murdered in her own house, so it seemed like a strange call. Upon arriving at the scene at 1550 Northwest 7th Avenue, the officers confirmed that Lillian was dead. Lying on the floor beside a toppled floor lamp and a telephone with the cord pulled out, Lillian had wounds and bruises all over her face and body that indicated she had been beaten. There were bloody towels and other pieces of clothing littered around the room. The officers also noticed a broken window in the room where Lillian's body was found, where Lillian's attackers had likely entered from. The house had been ransacked, and the several broken pieces of furniture strewn across the room indicated that there had likely been a vicious struggle as Lillian fought for her life. Lillian's body was in such a shocking state that at first glance it seemed to be a crime of passion. Lillian had contusions all over her body. Her ribs, nose, and wrist were fractured. She also had bruising around her genitals that suggested that she had been assaulted before being killed. The bruises on her neck also meant she had been strangled. The Broward Medical Examiner's office would conduct an autopsy on Lillian and conclude that she had died from asphyxiation and also suffered a blow to the head. The telephone with the cord pulled out, found next to Lillian's body, was what the attacker used to strangle her. However, there was no indication that Lillian was specifically targeted by her attacker, meaning the crime was likely not of passion. Lillian was generally beloved in her community, so she had no enemies. According to Lieutenant Earl Fluellen from the Pompano Beach Police Department, the scene of the crime and the general state of the house indicated that the case was likely that of a burglary gone wrong, but that did not make sense to Lillian's family members, who knew that Lillian lived alone and did not have any money worth losing her life for. June recalled that Lillian did not have more than $50 at the house at the time of the incident. After searching the house, the only item that appeared to be missing was a gold wedding band. After gathering evidence from the crime scene, police officers began interviewing Lillian's neighbors to find out if they had heard or seen anything related to Lillian's murder. But according to the neighbors, the last time they saw Lillian was around 6:50 a.m. that morning when she went to buy a newspaper. She looked hale and hearty, and no one could recall seeing anything suspicious, even though the murder occurred in broad daylight. After only a few days, detectives had come up with a list of potential suspects in Lillian's murder, but they still did not have enough to make an arrest. To motivate people to try and remember anything they could have seen or heard that could help with the investigation, the police put out a $1,000 reward for information leading to the arrest of Lillian's murderer. Pompano Beach Police spokeswoman Sandra King also told the media that the police were looking for anyone who knew anything about the crime or the man responsible for it. In an interview with the Sun-Sentinel, King said, "At this point, we are urging anyone who saw anything to call us. Some kind of human monster is walking around freely with the blood of a harmless 89-year-old woman on their hands. But despite this promising progress the investigation made in the first few weeks, all the leads soon dried up, and the case grew cold. Meanwhile, June Nicholas was grieving the loss of her beloved Aunt Lillian. She had to take a whole year off of work because it was just so hard to move on without her aunt, and without knowing what happened or who hurt her in that manner. The grief got so heavy that she had to ask someone else to take care of her kids for a few months because she was hurting too much to care for them. She couldn't wash the image of Lillian lying lifeless on the floor away from her mind, no matter how hard she tried. As if this wasn't bad enough, the case went cold, dashing all her hopes of discovering what had really happened to Lillian. For the next 10 years, there were no new updates in the Duclos case, and it was shelved and forgotten about. But by 1999, the Broward Sheriff's Office had begun providing law enforcement services to Pompano Beach. This included taking over all of Pompano Beach's cold cases. By 2004, one of the cold cases that the Broward Sheriff's Office detectives reopened was the 1994 homicide of Lillian Duclos. Detective David Towsley with the Broward Sheriff's Office headed the investigation with the help from other detectives from the unit. They reviewed old case files, DNA databases, and re-examined evidence collected from the crime scene almost 30 years earlier. One piece of evidence that stood out was the pink and white checkered nightgown that Lillian was wearing on the day she was murdered. When they sent this nightgown to the lab to be retested, they discovered that it had bodily fluids from the male attacker, which was perhaps the most crucial piece of evidence in solving the mystery. When the police developed a genetic profile from the fluid sample obtained from the nightgown, they entered the information into the FBI's Combined DNA Index System, also known as CODES, but they could not find a match. Once again, a promising lead had dried up, and the case went cold. However, Detective Towsley was determined to close the case of Lillian Duclos so that her family could find closure and move on. And so even if it took another 15 years, Detective Towsley's dogged determination led him to re-examine the case in 2019 under the Broward Sheriff's Office newly created Cold Case Unit. According to Jennifer Parker, the Broward Sheriff's Office criminalist in charge of conducting the DNA analysis of the evidence in the case, it did not initially seem like anything would come from reinvestigating the Duclos case. But thanks to advancements in DNA testing technology, Towsley believed he could unravel the identity of the individual who left their bodily fluid on Lillian's nightdress. Armed with this new technology, analysis at Broward County Crime Lab obtained a more thorough DNA profile. In 2021, Detective Towsley and his team asked the Florida Department of Law Enforcement to use the DNA profile to conduct a familial search of its offender database. That is, they ran the DNA profile through the database of registered offenders and people who had been arrested. This technique matches the DNA profile with the possible first-order relatives in the database, such as a child, father, or sibling. The search resulted in a match. The DNA from the crime scene shared overwhelming similarities with that of a known offender in the system. The offender turned out to be the son of the man whose DNA was found on the dress Lillian Duclos was wearing on the day she was murdered. This man's name was Johnny Mack Brown. Johnny Mack Brown was born in 1954, making him 40 years old at the time of Lillian Duclos' murder. A Vietnam War veteran who suffered from PTSD, life after the military was not good for Johnny. His PTSD made him resort to drug use, which eventually resulted in drug addiction. And because of his mental health issues and addiction, he could not find steady jobs. For a long time, Johnny became homeless as well. When investigators were initially investigating Lillian's death, John was never considered a suspect in the case or any other crime. He was entirely under the radar. However, when police made the match with Johnny's DNA profile, it became more apparent that he was very likely the man who had attacked Lillian on that fateful day. Police also discovered a crucial piece of information. In the early 1990s through 1994, Johnny lived only a few houses away from Lillian, but detectives could not arrest Johnny for questioning because he was dead. He died of natural causes in 2010 at the age of 56. Johnny was buried in the South Florida National Cemetery in Lake Worth, Florida. In August 2022, a judge granted Broward Sheriff's Office detectives requests to exhume Johnny's remains for examination. The detectives worked with the United States Department of Veteran Affairs, the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office, the Palm Beach Medical Examiner's Office, and a forensic anthropologist to exhume the remains and test them for DNA. The experts took samples from Johnny's body, and the Broward Sheriff's Office criminalist Jennifer Parker tested them in the Broward Sheriff's Office crime lab, comparing them to the existing DNA profile. To get the most accurate result possible, Parker took some of the bone marrow from Johnny's rib bone for testing. The test resulted in a match with the existing DNA profile from the sample found at the crime scene. According to the Broward Sheriff's Office, the DNA results showed that the DNA from the crime scene was 66.8 trillion times more likely to be from Johnny than from somebody else. With this conclusive evidence, there was no doubt that the killer in Lillian DeClose's case was Johnny Mac Brown, but that still did not explain why Johnny did what he did. The earlier assumption that it was just a case of burglary gone bad seemed to be the best explanation for the whole incident. In a press conference, Broward County Sheriff Gregory Toney explained that it was most likely a crime of opportunity. He lived close by, only a few houses down, the sheriff said. When he fell on hard times and he went homeless and had a drug habit, it indicated that he broke into the house. He may or may not have known she was there alone, but she was 89, she lived by herself, and it looked like all the drawers were opened and things were gone through the house. Police presented all the evidence they had collected thus far to the Broward State Attorney's Office. There, the prosecutors reviewed the case and concluded that Johnny Mac Brown was involved in the death of Lillian DeClose. The case was closed. Although 28 years is a long time to await justice, Sheriff Toney believes justice has no expiration date, he said. So long as we are responsible for investigating these cases, we are going to continue to push for the necessary manpower and effort to make sure that we can bring closure to so many families who have been waiting for decades time and time again in the hope that they get some resolution. Lillian DeClose's family spent 28 years praying for answers to the mysterious circumstances surrounding the death of their beloved Lillian. Finally, they have gotten the answers they were searching for, and they can now begin to move on. June Nicholas, the niece who found Lillian's cold body all those years ago, says she feels happy about the dedication of the Broward Sheriff's Office in uncovering the truth about her aunt's death. She believes now her aunt can finally rest in peace. I know wherever she is, she can sleep in peace. We can move on, she said. We can die in peace, because we know that it wasn't a murder that was unsolved. Although we end the story with the full knowledge of who killed Lillian DeClose, some questions cannot help but persist in our minds, demanding answers. For one, we may never know why Johnny Mac Brown did what he did, or if he felt guilty about it in the years that followed. Did the investigators take too long to find out who the real killer was? Can we genuinely say that justice was served in this case? On February 26, 1984, the Nassau County Police Department received a distressing call from a neighbor residing below the 3412 Ocean Harbor Drive apartment in New York, which belonged to Susan Eigen. Upon arriving at the scene, the officers were met with a truly horrifying discovery.
What we saw was one hysterical person, another woman off to, in the kitchen told us that someone was dead upstairs.
They found the lifeless body of 41-year-old Susan Eigen, the mother of three, lying in the hallway between the bedroom and the hall. In an even more heinous revelation, the police also uncovered the lifeless body of Susan's 17-year-old son, Richard, in the master bedroom. Who could have been responsible for committing such heinous acts? What possible motive could have driven someone to commit this unspeakable tragedy? Nestled along the shoreline of New York, Ocean Harbor Drive is a picturesque coastal avenue that exudes an air of tranquility and luxury. Lined with elegant waterfront homes and upscale properties, it is a coveted residential neighborhood that attracts the affluent and those seeking a serene coastal lifestyle. However, the allure of Ocean Harbor Drive in New York can sometimes conceal the shadows that lurk beneath its beauty. The haunting and tragic case of Susan Eigen and her son, Richard, serves as a stark reminder that even in idyllic settings, darkness can find its way. Susan K. Eigen, born in 1942, faced a tumultuous journey through life. As her marriage with Al Eigen crumbled, she mustered the strength to take a bold step forward and separate from her husband. She began to live independently and rebuild her life from scratch alongside her three children, Richard, Karen, and Michael. Her new beginning commenced at 3412 Ocean Harbor Drive in Long Island, New York, where she embraced hope for a brighter future. Amidst her peaceful surroundings, she gradually assimilated into the community, forming connections with her neighbors. Her efforts to start afresh seemed promising, and visitors from the neighborhood occasionally graced her home, giving her a sense of belonging. Little did she realize that the semblance of a normal life she had worked hard to establish was soon to be brutally shattered. It was February 26, 1984, and the innocence of a typical Sunday was soon to be turned into a nightmare for 11-year-old Michael Eigen as he returned home from a neighborhood hockey game. Instead of the warmth of his mother's presence, he was met with a chilling and gruesome scene. Susan Eigen, his mother, lay lifeless in the hallway, her body savagely beaten and strangled, an unimaginable sight that would haunt the young boy for years to come. He immediately ran to a neighbor's house, begging for help. Upon receiving the distress call from Susan's downstairs neighbor, whose name was not made public, the Nassau County Police Department arrived at the scene. As they entered the house, their eyes were met with the lifeless body of Susan, lying in the second-floor hallway, right in front of the master bedroom.
It was Susan Eigen laying in the doorway between the bedroom and the hall. She was in a fetal position. She had looked like a collar made out of a belt around her neck.
The police knew from their first glance that she had been a victim of assault. However, the darkest revelations were yet to come as the officers ventured into the master bedroom. When the police stepped inside the bedroom, they found Susan's 17-year-old son, Richard, also dead.
He was bound to a 3-step type entranceway up to the master bed, and he was bound by the wrists to the railing, and he was suffocated and strangled. He had wires around his neck, a plastic bag over his head, and the bag was covered by a gray coat.
After ensuring the area was secure, Officers Otto Kohlmeyer and Ed Carter of the Nassau County Police Department requested backup. Detective Herb Daub arrived at the crime scene and commenced a comprehensive investigation of the crime scene. The forensic team recovered a white bedsheet stained with blood, found in close proximity to Susan's body. Additionally, they collected hair strands from the bandana that had been used to strangle her. Bodily fluids were also found inside the home and collected as evidence. The bedroom exhibited signs of being ransacked, resembling a typical scene from a botched robbery. Dresser drawers were left open, and the contents of a pocketbook were scattered across the bed.
It appears to have been a burglary gone bad. That was probably our first theory.
During the crime scene investigation, the forensic team discovered 2 latent fingerprints. The first one was lifted from a bank receipt found amidst the scattered items on the bed, and the second one was recovered from the plastic bag used to suffocate Richard Eigen, which was still covering his face. Subsequently, the collective evidence was sent to the laboratory for further analysis and processing. With this theory in mind, investigators speculated that Richard had unexpectedly arrived home during the attack on his mother. Having witnessed the crime, he was murdered to prevent him from talking.
My theory is that he walked in while his mother was being beaten or raped or attacked or whatever.
And maybe he's screaming, maybe he's yelling. He put a bag over his head to quiet him. Now the kid's still yelling, or you could see his face through the bag. He put the coat over top of him to muffle the sounds. And then he went back and did whatever he had to do with Mrs. Eigen and eventually murdering her.
While the initial evidence seemed to support this theory, actually proving it would be another challenging task. In 1984, the field of forensic analysis lacked the advanced and sophisticated techniques available today. This limitation made it significantly more challenging to obtain definitive and conclusive results from the collected evidence. Investigators had to rely on conventional methods and technologies, which might not have provided as precise and detailed information as modern forensic techniques do. In August 1984, Detective Charlie Costello from the Fingerprint Division of the Crime Lab was performing tests on the latent fingerprints that were collected from the bag used to suffocate Richard and another from the bank receipt collected from Susan's purse. Believing that these fingerprints might belong to the intruder, Costello ran the prints through the Automated Fingerprint Identification System, or AFIS.
And we started looking into burglary patterns in the neighborhood, people that had been involved in the police in the general area. Our hope early on was that the fingerprint evidence would lead us to a particular person.
However, despite his efforts, he was unable to find a match in the system.
Any prints that I saw on that came across my desk on other cases I was working on, if it had a similar pattern to the print that I knew was on the Eigen case, I would compare the Eigen print against that case.
Since the murderer had no previous criminal records on file, the detectives decided to broaden their search by collecting fingerprints from individuals in the local area with a history or background in burglary. The idea was to compare these fingerprints with the ones found at the crime scene, hoping to identify a potential match or lead that could help them narrow down their suspect list. This method, though time-consuming, aimed to cast a wider net in their investigation and increase the chances of finding a connection to the perpetrator. Despite their diligent efforts and months of testing numerous fingerprint samples from potential suspects, the investigators were unable to match the fingerprints found at the crime scene. As time passed, they brought in as many samples as possible, but none of them yielded any results. Sadly, after nearly a year of exhaustive investigation, they had run out of new fingerprints to test, and without any viable suspects or leads, the case eventually went cold. After 18 years, on January 22, 2002, Detective Charlie Costello decided to try his luck once more and ran another fingerprint through APHIS, hoping for a breakthrough. To his immense relief, this time he obtained a positive result. Costello successfully matched the fingerprint found on the evidence to a fingerprint submitted on a school bus driver application. The applicant's name was Louis Talisi. Upon discovering this match to Louis Talisi, investigators learned that he was 42 years old at the time of the crime and had a history of drug possession. With Louis Talisi identified as the prime suspect, the cold case detectives exercised caution and patience, deciding to gather more concrete evidence before making an arrest. In February 2002, DNA Analysis McCarthy employed an ultraviolet beam to detect bodily fluid stains on the evidence that were collected from the crime scene, which were otherwise invisible to the human eye. Successfully collecting the fluid, McCarthy extracted a partial DNA profile from it. Armed with this partial DNA profile, the detectives knew they were getting closer to solving this case definitively. The only missing piece now was a sample of Louis Talisi's DNA to compare with the extracted profile and confirm the match. It was finally time for them to find Louis Talisi. On May 10, 2002, the task of securing Louis Talisi's DNA fell to Detective Tony Graziano, a skilled and well-organized undercover agent from the Nassau County Police Department. His mission was to discreetly obtain a covert DNA sample from the suspect without alerting Talisi to the ongoing investigation.
We devised a plan where I would go to Louis Talisi's home with Detective Sergeant Lucy Guido posing as my wife, and we would be prospective purchasers of the home.
At 11 a.m. on May 10, 2002, Detectives Graziano and Sergeant Guido initiated their operation by conducting a walkthrough of Louis Talisi's residence. The purpose of this walkthrough was to familiarize themselves with the layout of the house and gather any potential information that might be useful during their interaction with Talisi. Following the walkthrough, Detective Graziano took the lead in establishing a rapport with Talisi. Building rapport is a crucial skill in undercover work, as it helps gain the trust and confidence of the suspect. Over the course of their interaction, Graziano engaged Talisi in casual conversation, discussing various topics to create a comfortable and friendly atmosphere. The detectives knew that they had to approach the situation delicately, ensuring that Talisi remained unaware of their true purpose. Their goal was to gain Talisi's trust enough to obtain a covert DNA sample without raising any suspicion.
And basically, I knew I connected with him. We were talking like two, city guys. We were fast buddies.
As Detective Graziano and Sergeant Guido continued their walkthrough of Talisi's home, they maintained a casual atmosphere, with Talisi smoking a cigarette during the conversation. Subsequently, they stepped outside onto the street, where Talisi eventually discarded the cigarette butt without suspecting anything amiss. Their orchestrated plan was progressing as intended. After Talisi left the area, Sergeant Guido discreetly collected the discarded cigarette butt.
They were both on the street, and I was back on the driveway. And when I saw Talisi walk back towards the lawn, Detective Graziano pretty much gave me like the sign, come over by me.
Told Sergeant Guido to bend down like she was tying her shoe and pick up that cigarette butt, because I had seen Louis take it from his hand, throw it directly to the ground. So I had the continuity that that's directly evidence from him.
Detective Graziano and Guido wasted no time and immediately made their way to the crime lab. In the crime lab, the analysis carefully isolated the saliva and epithelial cells from the filter of the cigarette butt. The DNA present in the sample was extracted and purified, ensuring the removal of any potential contaminants. With the DNA profile from the cigarette butt now prepared, it was time to compare it to the previously extracted partial DNA profile obtained from the crime scene evidence. As expected, the moment of truth arrived, and the comparison revealed an undeniable match between the two DNA samples. The results confirmed that Louis Talisi was indeed the killer, linking him conclusively to the crime scene and the murders of Susan and Richard Eigen. After building a solid case with concrete evidence against him, Louis Talisi was finally arrested on June 5, 2002. Law enforcement officers took him downtown for questioning. In the Nassau County interviewing room, Louis Talisi was confronted with the evidence collected by the detectives, including the crucial fluid sample that linked him to the crime scene. Talisi, displaying his cunning nature, quickly latched on to a potential defense strategy. He acknowledged knowing Susan and cunningly claimed that he had a physical relationship with her. According to his statement, this explained the presence of his bodily fluid inside Susan's home, suggesting that it was not related to the murders. Talisi further stated that at the time of the murders he lived in Brooklyn and had been introduced to the Eigens by friends who lived next door to them. Subsequently, Talisi had met the Eigens on several occasions in the past. However, the detectives asserted that on the day of the murder, he was not an invited guest. The cold case detectives didn't believe Talisi's statement, but they knew the potential complication Talisi's statement might introduce during the court proceedings. They understood that handling it with precision was crucial. Nonetheless, they held one last decisive piece of evidence, a trump card that if presented skillfully would leave Talisi with no escape route. On July 3, 2002, DNA analyst Terry Melton took possession of 2 strands of hair that were recovered from the bandana used to strangle Susan Eigen. Melton then extracted a DNA profile from the hair samples. The crucial step was to compare this newly obtained DNA profile with Louis Talisi's existing DNA profile.
We had hairs from several known individuals, including Louis Talise, who was the suspect in the case. And what we found was that one of the hairs matched the type of Louis Talise.
And with DNA analysis of the hair strands from the bandana matching Louis Talisi's DNA profile, the final piece of the puzzle was completed for the cold case detectives. After the completion of the investigation and the compilation of a strong case against Louis Talisi, the Eigen double murder case was handed over to the Nassau County District Attorney's Office. The District Attorney's team reviewed the evidence and prepared for the trial. The case was put on the court docket, and trial proceedings began. Assistant DA Robert Biancavilla painted a picture of death Talisi fashioned for Susan and Richard Eigen.
He thought nothing about the manner in which he strangled and killed Susan. He thought nothing about taking a plastic bag and tying it in a knot over the head of a 17-year-old boy and then strapping him to a banister and essentially watching him suffocate to death. All right, this is a person that is never going to accept responsibility for what he did and deserves, as far as I'm concerned, absolutely no mercy.
Despite the mounting evidence against him, Louis Talisi remained unwilling to confess to the murders. His defense attorney, Michael Washore, put forth a defense strategy to create reasonable doubt in the jury's minds. Washore claimed that Talisi was attempting a family gathering on the day of the murders, suggesting an alibi to counter the prosecution's case. In an effort to cast doubt on Talisi's involvement, Washore also proposed the possibility that other individuals who knew the Eigens may have been responsible for the crimes. During the trial, Louis Talisi took the opportunity to briefly speak in court. He expressed his deepest condolences to the families of Susan and Richard Eigen, acknowledging the profound loss they had suffered. However, he also maintained his stance, asserting that he was innocent of the crimes he was accused of committing. Michael Eigen, Susan's son, addressed the court and shared a haunting memory that had stayed with him since the murders. He recounted an incident that occurred 4 years after the tragic events, when he and his teenage friend found themselves on a boat with Louis Talisi. Michael revealed that Talisi's cousin lived next door to him, leading to this unexpected encounter. According to Michael's testimony, Talisi appeared to be in a state of distress, consuming alcohol and smoking while talking at length about himself and his perceived misery in life. With poster-sized photos of his beloved mother and brother displayed behind him in the courtroom, Michael continued to address the jury. He shared how deeply he had been affected by the defense's portrayal of his mother during the trial. Louis Talisi's defense attorney had attempted to create reasonable doubt by suggesting alternative scenarios and other potential suspects. In doing so, they had painted an unflattering and distorted picture of Susan Eigen. In a powerful and emotional courtroom scene, 3 other relatives of the victim also addressed the court during the sentencing phase of the trial. Al Eigen, Susan's former husband, and Richard's father turned toward Louis Talisi and directly expressed the magnitude of the devastation caused by his actions. He described the murders as the most horrific crime imaginable, one that had torn apart a family. Al Eigen acknowledged that no sentence could ever fully compensate for the loss they had endured. Still, he urged the judge to impose the maximum penalty upon the convicted murderer. His words carried the weight of a grieving father seeking justice for his beloved ex-wife and son. Similarly, Eugene K., Susan's brother, tearfully addressed the judge, struggling to find words to convey the deep pain inflicted by Talisi's callous actions. Through tears and deep breaths, he asked the judge to consider the profound cruelty and heartlessness displayed by the defendant as they determined the appropriate sentence. In an emotionally charged moment during the sentencing, Karen Eigen, the daughter and sister of Susan and Richard, was unable to attend in person. Instead, her best friend, Wendy Woods, read a heartfelt statement on her behalf. This statement conveyed the profound impact that the murders had on Karen's life, revealing that she had effectively lost her childhood on the day of the tragic events. Karen's statement expressed her bewilderment and disbelief that someone capable of committing such heinous crimes could still maintain their innocence. During their trial, Assistant District Attorney Robert Biancavilla presented a compelling case against Louis Talisi. He charged that Talisi had a specific intent to rob the Eigens in order to support his cocaine habit. According to the prosecution's theory, Talisi broke into the Eigens' home with the intent to steal valuable items and money. However, the burglary took a horrifying turn when he encountered Susan Eigen inside the house. In the course of the robbery, Talisi assaulted and ultimately murdered Susan in a brutal act of violence. The situation escalated further when Richard Eigen unexpectedly entered the home during the burglary. The prosecution contended that fearing his crime would be exposed and unwilling to leave behind any witnesses, Talisi made the chilling decision to kill Richard as well. With the overwhelming evidence gathered by the cold case detectives and the prosecutor's compelling case during the trial, Louis Talisi had no viable defense. The evidence pointed unequivocally towards his involvement in the brutal crimes, leaving him with no way out of the situation. Talisi was finally charged with second-degree murder, kidnapping, burglary, and aggravated assault. During the sentencing hearing on June 2, 2004, Michael Eigen, the son and brother of the victims, addressed the court once again. In an emotional statement, he expressed the profound impact that the murders had on his life. Michael shared that the loss of his home, his mother, and his brother were among the many things stolen from him by Talisi. In recognition of the devastating losses suffered by the Eigen family and the heinous nature of the crimes, Nassau County Court Judge Joseph Calabrese handed down the sentence to Louis Talisi. The judge sentenced him to 2 consecutive 25 years to life prison terms for the 1984 murders of Susan and Richard Eigen, the Oceanside mother and son. Judge Joseph Calabrese made it clear to Talisi that he saw no reason to show any leniency or mercy towards him. The judge emphasized that the method by which Talisi had murdered his victims was deliberate and intended to cause maximum pain and suffering. Furthermore, Calabrese pointed out that Talisi had demonstrated no remorse for his actions throughout the entire trial process. Michael Eigen, after the sentencing, spoke to reporters and expressed his thoughts on Louis Talisi's continued insistence on his innocence. He stated that Talisi's refusal to admit guilt was consistent with a pattern of behavior in his life. Michael implied that his behavior might be indicative of Talisi's unwillingness to take responsibility for his actions. With the knowledge that Talisi would be behind bars for at least 50 years due to consecutive life sentences, Michael acknowledged that a certain portion of his mind found ease in knowing that the perpetrator would face the consequences of his crimes for a significant portion of his life. Michael was ready to begin the process of moving beyond the tragedy that had haunted them for so many years. In 2005, a year after being sentenced for the murders of Susan and Richard Eigen, Louis Talisi passed away while serving his prison sentence. His death marked the end of his life behind bars. cutting short the sentence imposed upon him by the court. So what are your thoughts on this case? Do you think the Eigen family finally found peace with Talisi's death after just 1 year of being behind bars?
It was a bright Tuesday morning on September 3, 1978, when a grisly discovery was made in an illegal landfill located approximately 1 mile south of an old bridge in Rankin County, Mississippi. The lifeless body of a young woman was found wrapped in a blanket. The area near the Byram Swinging Bridge was once a place of beauty and tranquility, but on this fateful day, it was transformed into a crime scene. The lifeless body of the young victim had been dumped unceremoniously amongst heaps of refuse, as if her existence had been discarded like yesterday's trash. Despite the best efforts of the investigators, there were no clues at the scene to help identify the victim, and she had likely been deceased for several days before being found. She was a nameless victim without any family and friends to mourn her loss. The gruesome details of her death were not immediately clear, but investigators did note that she had suffered a severe blow to the head. The woman was completely nude, with no personal effects to offer even a hint at her identity. It was as if she had simply appeared out of thin air, only to meet a tragic end at the hands of a heartless killer. Who was she, and who could have done such a terrible thing to her? These were the questions that lingered in the minds of the investigators. It was difficult to imagine the pain and suffering the young woman had endured before her tragic end. Her body was then sent for an autopsy to determine the cause of her death that same day on September 3, 1978. The mystery of the woman deepened as the autopsy report revealed that her cause of death was a severe head trauma. The examiners found no evidence of physical assault or sexual abuse, but they did find multiple abrasions on her face, arms, and back. Despite their thorough examination, they were unable to determine the exact circumstances that led to her untimely demise. The only clue they had was her age, which they estimated to be between 20 to 25 years old. The investigators were determined to bring justice to the unidentified victim found at the illegal landfill in Rankin County. The next day, on September 4, 1978, they scoured the area and started with knocking on doors and asking locals if they could recall any suspicious activity or out-of-the-ordinary occurrences during the time frame when the victim's body was found. But no one seemed to know anything about who this woman could be. So the investigators gave her a name, Mississippi Jane Doe. They continued to follow leads across the United States and Canada in hopes of uncovering her identity and pursue the case, but every avenue they explored hit a dead end. The case ultimately became cold and faded into obscurity, leaving behind unanswered questions and a sense of injustice for the victim. It would remain like this for over 4 decades. Finally, a glimmer of hope shone through in April 2021. The case was entered into the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System, NAMIS, for help, in the hope that someone, somewhere, might recognize her and bring her identity into light. The case, known only as UP79780, had stumped investigators for over 4 decades, with no known missing person reports matching the victim's description. However, even with the help of advanced technology and the resources of the NAMIS system, the woman's identity remained a mystery. It seemed like the case of the unidentified Jane Doe was doomed to be forever unsolved. But fate intervened when officials from Ohio contacted Rankin County Coroner David Ruth and his deputy, Heather Smith, about a strikingly similar case in their state which had been solved using genetic genealogy. Suddenly, the Mississippi officials found themselves reinvigorated and determined to finally get a step closer towards her identity. They filed a petition with the courts to exhume the victim's body, and after careful consideration of the evidence, Judge Dewey Arthur granted their request. The long-dormant case was about to be reignited, and the search for answers was just getting started. In April 2022, officials embarked on the mission to uncover the truth behind this decades-old mystery. With determination and a keen eye for detail, they carefully exhumed the body of the homicide victim, who had been buried for over 40 years. Coroner David Ruth and his team collected and prepared the forensic evidence with meticulous care, knowing that it could hold the key to finally identifying her. Their mission was clear: to extract the DNA necessary to unravel the secrets of the past. In the heart of Mississippi, there was a philanthropist named Carla Davis who was committed to help solve the state's unsolved cases. With a passion for justice and a generous heart, Carla stepped up to fund the exhumation of the unidentified woman and promised to continue funding the casework necessary to identify her. She knew that finding the woman's identity was the key to solving the case and bringing closure to the woman's family. Her commitment to justice and compassion for the victim and her family serves as a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there are still people out there fighting for what's right. Despite their best efforts, the first 2 attempts at DNA testing failed to provide any breakthrough in identifying the woman. However, Carla Davis and the tenacious Rankin County investigators refused to give up hope. They decided to turn to a cutting-edge laboratory with an impressive track record of solving complex cases, Othram. This forensic laboratory had already helped crack more than a dozen challenging cases in Mississippi, and they were up for the challenge of unlocking the secrets hidden within the forensic evidence of this case. With a renewed sense of hope, they embarked on a 3rd attempt, determined to bring her identity forward. In a scientific breakthrough that breathed new life into the decades-old case, Othram Laboratories received a small vial of forensic evidence from the 1978 James Doe. Despite previous attempts at DNA extraction ending in failure, the Othram lab team were determined to crack the case wide open. And finally, they were able to produce a DNA extract that could potentially lead to solving the case. With the advanced technology of forensic-grade genome sequencing, Othram scientists delved into the DNA of the unidentified female homicide victim. The genetic code contained within her bones was like a puzzle waiting to be solved, and the team at Othram worked tirelessly to put the pieces together. Using their state-of-the-art equipment and expertise, they were able to unravel the mystery of her genetics and create a comprehensive genealogical profile. After the comprehensive genealogical profile was produced, Othram's chief genetic genealogist, Carla Davis, took the lead in searching for potential relatives of Mississippi Jane Doe. A Mississippi native dedicated to solving the state's unsolved cases, Carla was determined to bring closure to this decades-old mystery. She combed through public records, social media, and other sources to identify potential family members. After extensive research, Carla discovered a potential close relative of the victim. She was possibly the daughter of Mississippi Jane Doe. Additional DNA testing was conducted, and the results confirmed the investigative leads delivered by Othram. The mystery of the 1978 Jane Doe was finally solved, and her family could finally receive the answers they had been searching for. The identity of the long-unknown Jane Doe was finally revealed on February 12, 2023. The woman was no longer a nameless victim. She was Tonya Lee Wills Mullins, and she had been 22 when her life ended in such a tragic manner. Tonya, born on May 12, 1956 in Potter, Texas, was a child with a heart full of love and compassion. Her mother, Carrie Coffey, instilled in her daughter the values of kindness and empathy, which Tonya carried with her throughout her life. As a young girl, Tonya would often sing to soothe the souls of those around her, her angelic voice bringing comfort to all who heard it. These qualities of warmth and tenderness made Tonya a beloved figure among family and friends, and they remain an inspiration to all who knew her. When Tonya was 16 years old in the early 70s, she met Jim Mullin, who was a student at River Road Independent School. Tonya and Jim were just two young souls, still in the prime of their youth, when fate brought them together. They met in a small town of Texas, where life was slow and easy, but love had a way of making things exciting. From the moment they laid eyes on each other, they knew that they were meant to be together. Tonya had always been a shy girl, but Jim brought out the best in her. His charming smile and easygoing personality made her feel like she was the most important person in the world. And for Jim, Tonya was the missing piece of his puzzle. He had never felt such a strong connection with anyone before, and he knew that he had to have her in his life. But their love was not without its challenges. Jim's family was not fond of Tonya, and they made their disapproval known from the very beginning. They saw her as an outsider, someone who didn't belong in their close-knit community. But Jim was not one to be swayed by others' opinions. He was determined to be with Tonya, no matter what. Despite objections from their parents, the two lovers stood firm in their decision and exchanged their vows, determined to build a life together. Tonya, the beautiful bride, was a force to be reckoned with, standing up for what she believed in and always putting the needs of others before her own. Her strength and determination were evident in every aspect of her life, and her love for her family knew no bounds. And so the young couple embarked on a journey of love and commitment after being wed in 1973, a journey that would define them for years to come. A year into their marriage, Tonya gave birth to their first daughter, Tammy, in 1974, and 3 years later, in 1977, they had another, whom they named Crystal. In 1978, Tonya moved to Mississippi with her husband, Jim Mullins, and their 2 toddlers. Sadly, Tonya went missing after some months and was never seen again, leaving her family and friends to wonder what had happened to her for over 4 decades. But now, thanks to the dedication of forensic experts and the funding provided by philanthropist Carla Davis, Tonya's story can finally be told. Tammy Mullins, who is now 49 years old, reveals the story of her family's disappearance. Tammy's father had left to find a home for the family in Texas, but when he returned, he found his wife and 2 young daughters missing. He had no idea where they were. He made all the possible efforts to find his wife and his daughters, but it was all in vain. It was 3 months later that Tammy's grandmother received a mysterious phone call where she was told that if she wanted her granddaughters back, then she should come to DFW Airport. Before she could understand anything or could ask about Tonya, the call ended. Jim and his mother hurriedly went to the airport, which led to a tearful reunion between the girls and their father at the DFW airport. However, the joy was short-lived as their father was informed that their mother Tonya would be in touch soon, but that never happened. The family was left in the dark, wondering what had happened to Tonya. Until now, that is, since the power of forensic science has helped Tammy and her family finally have the answers they've been seeking for over 40 years. Tammy Mullin shared that after her mother's disappearance, their family received conflicting stories about where she had gone. Some said that she had left for Mexico with a man, while others claimed that she was in Florida. Despite the uncertainty surrounding her whereabouts, Tammy and her sister remember their mother as someone who loved and adored them. Tonya had a special talent for dressing them up like little dolls. Tammy and Crystal spoke with unwavering admiration for their father, who always answered their questions with honesty and never spoke ill of their mother. They knew that he loved her until the very end and was just as heartbroken as they were. After they were informed of what had happened to her, the sisters decided to honor her memory by traveling to Mississippi to attend a memorial service on March 14, 2023. It was a journey filled with mixed emotions, but they knew it was important to be there for each other and to pay tribute to the woman who had loved them so deeply. Tammy spoke with a resolute voice as she shared her thoughts on the recent turn of events in her mother's case. She expressed that the discovery of her mother's murder had opened a new chapter in their lives, one that they never expected to face. The trauma of their mother's sudden departure has now been replaced with the urgent need to find the person responsible for her death. Tammy believes that divine justice will prevail and that the perpetrator will ultimately face the consequences of their actions. Despite the long passage of time, there is still hope of finding a suspect, as the coroner David Ruth has suggested that it is not impossible. The Mullin sisters are determined to seek closure and find justice for their beloved mother, no matter how long it takes. The unnatural death of Tonya not only left her family but also the community of Mississippi with unanswered questions. But thanks to the tireless effort of the local sheriff's department, Tonya Mullins was finally identified. Coroner David Ruth expressed his satisfaction with the outcome, saying that revealing the identity of the victim was the most rewarding thing to him. And the best part was that the investigation didn't cost taxpayers a single penny. Thanks to the generosity of Carla Davis, who funded the exhumation and forensic testing necessary to solve the case. It's heartening to know that there are still good people out there willing to help resolve these cold cases and bring justice to families like the Mullins. While the missing persons investigation is now closed, the murder investigation is still ongoing, as the killer behind this heinous act is yet to be caught. This case takes us to Rockdale, a village in the state of Illinois, located a little over 40 miles west of Chicago. May the 13th, 1997 started out like any other typical day in Rockdale, Illinois. The sun was beating down relentlessly on a building construction site, where heavy machinery and workers were busy moving debris and waste from a dusty landfill. Amidst all the chaos and noise, Kevin P. McGowan, an archaeologist from the prestigious University of Illinois, was quietly and methodically sifting through the layers of refuse and debris, searching for any hidden artifacts or historical remnants. But little did he know that he was about to stumble upon something far more shocking and disturbing than he could ever have imagined. As his eyes sifted through the layers of debris, his trained eyes noticed something peculiar. There, buried beneath the dusty landfill in Rockdale, Illinois, was a bone unlike any other in the pile. He felt a jolt of excitement as he carefully extracted it from the debris. His heart raced with anticipation. It was covered in dirt and grime, evidence of its long-forgotten existence. With a gentle hand he wiped it clean, revealing its true shape and size. The bone seemed to tell a story of its own, whispering secrets of a time long past. But as he examined the bone more closely, he realized with growing horror that it was a human's bone. The archaeologist, along with his assistant, had stumbled upon the remains of a human body. According to the police, the remains were found at about 10:15 a.m. on September 3, 1978, several hundred yards northeast of Mound Road and Moen Avenue, on the outskirts of Rockdale. As his discovery sent shockwaves through the dusty landfill in Rockdale, he quickly called the sheriff's office and the authorities were quick to respond. What started as a routine archaeological research in an unincorporated Joliet Township turned into a full-blown investigation when a human bone was discovered on the premises. The police, arriving at the scene in a flurry of activity, cordoned off the area to begin their investigation. It was apparent to investigators that they were dealing with a homicide case. It seemed that whoever buried the body underground was trying to conceal it from the world. The remains had been unceremoniously buried, hinting at a cruel and inhumane act. The investigators could tell that the victim had been murdered because only one bone was discovered, which means that the person would have been cut into pieces, and the other body parts would have been scattered at different places, adding a sense of urgency to their work. They were determined to uncover the truth behind this heinous crime, and the hunt for answers had begun. The stakes were high, and the weight of responsibility on their shoulders was immense. but they were ready to face the challenges that lay ahead. The discovery sent shockwaves through the community, prompting law enforcement officials to launch a thorough investigation. Who was the deceased, and how did the person end up buried in the landfill? These were the questions on everyone's mind. The investigation was far from easy. It would take years of tireless work, countless interviews, and the latest scientific breakthroughs to solve the mystery. The officers stood around the partial remains of the body, their eyes locked onto the grisly sight mixed with curiosity and concern. It was clear that something had disturbed the rest of the body, and the officers couldn't help but wonder where the other body parts were. The scene was quickly secured, and detectives were called to investigate further. With their experience and expertise, they hoped to uncover any additional skeletal remains that might provide vital clues to solving this macabre crime. Amidst the rubble and debris, the investigators painstakingly combed through the construction landfill, the layers of brick, stone, and wood. As they dug deeper, what they discovered became more gruesome and chilling. Skeletal remains, broken and fragmented, emerged from the debris. The source of this debris was traced back to the Rustcraft building, a massive 3-story structure with a full basement that once dominated the Joliet skyline. The investigators knew that they had their work cut out for them as they delved deeper into this bone-chilling discovery. In the world of forensic investigation, pathologists are the skilled professionals who meticulously examine the human body and its tissues to unravel the secrets of death. However, in the case of the unknown remains, authorities take a slightly different approach. Instead of a traditional pathologist examination, the remains undergo an anthropological examination. This fascinating field involves the study of human skeletal remains to determine age, gender, ancestry, and other characteristics that can help piece together the identity of the deceased. With only partial skeletal remains recovered, it was a daunting task to piece together the clues and unravel the secrets. They managed to glean some fascinating insights into the life of these mysterious bone fragments, revealing a glimpse of the past and perhaps even unlocking some secrets of the person's untimely demise. From just fragments of bones, pathologists were able to put together some fascinating details about the unknown person on October 14, 1997. The bones were of a woman. She was estimated to be in her youth, somewhere between the ages of 15 and 24 years old, with her entire life ahead of her. She stood between 5 and 5 foot 10 inches tall. Despite her incomplete remains, these details allowed them to imagine what this young woman might have been like in life, and spark a sense of curiosity about her untold story. Without any identity to be followed, the person whose bones were found was given the name Rockdale's Jane Doe. Forensic pathologists were unable to determine any other distinguishing features about her appearance. Was she fair-skinned or olive-toned? Did she have auburn hair or jet black locks? The answers to these questions, like the woman herself, were buried in the ground and lost to time. Yet, despite the lack of information, the pathologists remained undaunted in their quest for answers, knowing that even the smallest detail could make all the difference in solving this perplexing case. As the investigators looked towards the timeline of events, a poignant realization dawned upon them. The unknown woman had likely lived and died in the years leading up to the demolition of the Rustcraft building in 1986. What was her life like during those tumultuous years, and what led to her untimely demise? The world around her was changing rapidly, with new technologies, cultural shifts, and political upheavals reshaping the landscape. Was she a witness to these changes, or was she struggling to survive amidst the chaos? As the investigators pondered these questions, they couldn't help but feel a deep sense of sadness for the woman whose life had ended in such a tragic and mysterious manner. When they dug deeper into the history of the mysterious building in whose rubble the remains were found, They uncovered a treasure trove of information that left them intrigued. It turns out that this ancient structure had been used by numerous companies since its inception in 1907. It was once a majestic factory, a towering structure, which was struck by disaster in 1992. The flames of a ferocious fire raged through the building for 2 long days, devouring everything in its path. The flames reached high into the sky, licking at the clouds like a vengeful beast, taunting the brave firefighters who fought bravely to contain the inferno. But their efforts were in vain, and the once magnificent factory was reduced to a mere shadow of its former self, a solemn reminder of the destructive power of fire. Before its demise, the factory had become something of a heaven for the local homeless population. The building was far from safe, but for those who had nowhere else to go, it provided shelter from the elements. However, it was also known to be a hotbed of criminal activity, with nefarious characters lurking in the shadows. As the smoke cleared and the ashes settled, the city knew they had to act fast. The once towering factory had become a ticking time bomb, posing a threat to all who ventured near. With heavy hearts, the decision was made to demolish the building, but the question remained: what to do with the rubble? A stroke of genius provided a solution that the debris should be carefully cleared, leaving behind a barren wasteland where the factory once stood. However, the remnants of the wreckage were not discarded, but rather repurposed. The basement of the factory was filled with the remains of the building, providing a solid foundation for what would come next. When they investigated further, they learned that in 1995, a curious decision was made to uproot the building's remains and relocate them to a new location in Rockdale, where the bone fragments were found. Their theory that the woman was killed elsewhere and then buried in this spot was confirmed when the pathologist informed them that the body of the unknown woman had been disturbed not once, but twice after death, suggesting that someone had been present at the original factory location. The mystery surrounding the woman's demise only deepened with this disturbing revelation. In 2009, hope emerged when the Will County coroner, Patrick K. O'Neill, formed a dedicated team to bring justice to the forgotten victim. The Coldcase unit embarked on an arduous journey, meticulously piecing together every detail of the case. Over the years, forensic anthropology studies were conducted. DNA was extracted and entered into the vast National Missing and Unidentified Persons database, NamUs, and the profile was tirelessly searched in CODIS, the FBI's combined DNA index system. The team even turned to the latest in FBI technology, commissioning a specialized unit to create a facial reconstruction of the unknown woman. Yet each lead was pursued and ultimately eliminated, leaving the team with more questions than answers. On June 8, 2022, the Will County Coroner's Office teamed up with Othram, a forensic DNA sequencing laboratory, to solve the puzzling cold case of Rockdale's Jane Doe. Armed with cutting-edge technology and a determination to solve this long-standing riddle, the team set out on their quest, but it wouldn't be easy. Previous attempts at DNA testing had failed, leaving little hope for a breakthrough. However, the Will County Coroner's Office was undeterred and even contributed funding to support the new round of testing. With advanced forensic DNA testing at their disposal, the team was determined to crack the case once and for all. And with the help of a crowdfund campaign that raised additional funds and support from the community, the team was finally able to move forward with their investigation. The stakes were high and the pressure was on, but the team was ready to do whatever it took to bring closure to this long-standing mystery. Kristen Middleman, the Chief Development Officer at Othram, knew the importance of identifying the perpetrators or victims of a crime, and that's exactly what Othram was able to do in this case. The experts at Othram were determined to crack the case, and they knew that advanced DNA testing was the key to unlocking the mystery of the unknown woman's identity. Through forensic-grade genome sequencing technology, they were able to extract key genetic information from the skeletal remains, enabling them to construct a comprehensive genealogical profile. But that was just the beginning. With dogged determination, the Othrams' in-house genetic genealogy team then took over, tirelessly researching the family tree to create an investigative lead for law enforcement. Their dedication paid off, and the breakthrough they were hoping for finally emerged. The lab was able to uncover a match of possible relatives, providing the veteran investigators with a crucial lead. It was the moment they had been waiting for, the break in the case that could finally bring some closure to this unsolvable mystery. The investigation was far from over, but this breakthrough gave them renewed hope. Once the leads were returned to law enforcement, cold case investigators interviewed several people in Illinois, Texas, and California. After years of painstaking investigation, the answers finally came to them. Othram's advanced DNA testing had led them to a man in California named Christ O'Brien, who they believed could be the key to unlocking the mystery of the unidentified woman. Cold case investigators from the coroner's office quickly made their way to his house and interviewed him, and discovered that he had a sister who he had not seen since 1984. Could this missing sister be the unidentified woman they had been searching for all these years? To answer this question, they collected DNA from Christ O'Brien and sent it to the Othram labs for further testing, and the subsequent kin SNP testing confirmed that Christ and the identified woman were half-siblings. His long-lost sister had finally been found, thanks to the tireless efforts of law enforcement and the cutting-edge technology of Othram. On March 3, 2023, after 26 years of being a nameless victim in a cold case, the woman who had been found in the ruins of an Illinois factory in 1997 finally had a name: Marie R. O'Brien. Born in the charming town of Aurora on July 16, 1966, Marie was a daughter, sister, and friend to those who knew her. Her elder brother, Christ O'Brien, was someone she looked up to and loved dearly. And though her life was tragically cut short, Marie's memory will now live on with dignity and warmth, as her loved ones can finally lay her to rest with a sense of closure. Marie R. O'Brien was a bright and cheerful student at Golden Rule Charter School, where her outgoing nature and friendly demeanor earned her many friends. Her trusting nature, however, often raised concern among those who cared about her. Her elder brother, Christ O'Brien, described her by saying that she often placed her trust in random strangers too easily, a trait that may have ultimately led to her tragic fate. Despite her brother's efforts to contact her after 1984, Marie disappeared without a trace, leaving behind a void in the lives of those who knew her. Marie R. O'Brien may have been a woman of few words, but her actions spoke volumes. Her community in Aurora knew her as a true gem, a kind-hearted soul who always put others first. From a young age, Marie's talents were evident to all. She was a creative force, and her passion for art was undeniable. Her paintings were breathtaking and were cherished by all who received them. But Marie's generosity extended far beyond her artistic talents. She was always willing to lend a helping hand, and her selfless nature was an inspiration to all those around her. It's no wonder that she was so well loved by her friends and family, who couldn't get enough of her infectious warmth and charming personality. Though her time was tragically cut short, Marie's legacy lives on through the lives she touched with her kindness and creativity. But the case is not yet solved. There are questions that still linger in the minds of Marie's loved ones. Who took her away from them? As they wait for justice to be served, they hold on to hope that the perpetrator will be caught and closure will finally be within reach. For Christ, Marie's older brother, the wait has been agonizing. Every day, he wonders who could have done this to his beloved sister and why. But he remains determined to see the case through to its end, to bring peace to Maria's memory and justice to her name. The search for answers continues, and the family's faith in the investigative team never wavers.
Let us know your thoughts in the comments section. We'd love to hear from you. If you have any case you want us to cover on this channel, please drop your suggestions in the comments. If you enjoyed today's story, kindly give it a like and a share. Also, subscribe to this channel and turn on post notifications so you're the first to know when a new video drops.